Right. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 2nd of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Patrick Christie's.
Well, the race for the next Tory leader kicks into gear today. Kemi Badenoch was the first to go, but refused to say what level of immigration she'd like to see. And we're gearing up now for James Cleverly's speech. In just a few minutes, we'll take that to you live.
Who's your money on? OK, now, dodging a vote. Labour accused of hiding from scrutiny as MPs now demand a vote in Parliament on the scrapping of the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. I want to hear from you on that. Should they put it to a vote?
Absolutely. And the rise of the right. Germany's right-wing anti-immigration party, the AfD, storms to victory in a key state election. This just days after Keir Starmer urged progressives in Europe to fend off the threat of snake oil populists.
Well, we've got loads on today, haven't we? But of course, this show only survives with you and your input. So make sure you get in touch with us by going to gbnews.com/your say. The big one for us today that we want to hear from you on, really, I think, is whether or not Labour should put a vote to Parliament on scrapping the winter fuel payments. They might be scrapping your winter fuel payment. If they are, then let us know. I think the other one probably is the old immigration cap. Should Kemi Badenoch have put a number on?
Yeah, is it good enough? Is it good enough to just say, oh, we'll, well, is it good enough to speak in such vague terms about immigration when it is currently the #1 issue for voters? She swerved it entirely. We'll play the clip to you just to remind you of what exactly she said. This was a question put by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, to us. She didn't want to give a number. She gave a vague answer on how to improve the Home Office and things like this. But I think people want a number, or perhaps you don't believe in targets anyway. But yes, the winter fuel allowance, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, of course, they're saying there must be a vote in Parliament. So far, though, government sources are saying absolutely not. That is not going to happen. But this is a policy that could affect 10 million pensioners.
Yeah, I think they may well lose that vote. I think quite a lot of Labour MPs would think that we should just pay everything for everybody. Therefore, how on earth would you square not having a winter fuel payment for millions of pensioners? But there we go. Could that be Sir Keir Starmer's first rebellion? Is he just trying to swerve everything and have no democracy? But yeah, go to gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch with us. But now we've got the headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick. Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. Kemi Badenoch's launched her Tory leadership campaign a short while ago, calling for change in the Conservative Party. The Shadow Communities Secretary and contender to replace Rishi Sunak said her party has to focus on renewal to be ready to return to power. Ms Badenoch used the speech to also accuse the Labour Party of pulling the wool over the eyes of the public, insisting that it's time for something new.
We can't just sit around pointing out how terrible Labour are. That's just not good enough. And we can't just keep having the same policy arguments from the last Parliament. We are not in power, we lost. Labour will fail. And when that time comes and the British people are looking for change, we have to be that change. We have to focus on renewal. The renewal of our party, our politics and our thinking. And it starts with principles. Principles are the fundamentals that give us direction, unity and certainty. They must underpin everything we do.
Meanwhile, in a major speech in London shortly, leadership contender James Cleverly is expected to say that Conservative answers are needed to solve the most challenging problems facing our country. Cleverly will highlight the need for us to remake the argument for capitalism to boost economic growth and give younger people a stake in society. He's expected to argue we should be a family-first society and stop looking to the state as our first port of call. In other news, the Prime Minister has said the scrapping of single-phrase inspection headline grades for schools in England will be a relief for parents. Previously, Ofsted awarded 1 of 4 headline grades to schools it inspects, and those are outstanding, good, requires improvement and inadequate. The Department for Education says for inspections this academic year, parents will see 4 grades across the existing subcategories, those being quality of education, behaviour and attitudes, personal development and leadership and management. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has told reporters this morning that the death of head teacher Ruth Perry made the need for Ofsted reform absolutely clear. And the Prime Minister says it'll hold schools accountable.
I've got a mission for our government, which is to make sure that every single child, whatever their background, wherever they come from, has the best possible education. And this move today is about driving up standards, making sure that we've got a richer picture so parents can see in a more accountable way the real strength of a school and making sure we've got the improvements in to catch schools quickly. So this is all about driving up standards. And I'm really pleased that we're able to do it so quickly.
From today, the government will fund 15 hours per week of free childcare for eligible working parents whose children are between 9 months and 2 years old. The 15 hours per week is in addition to an existing offer to parents of 2-year-olds and 30 hours of free childcare already offered to parents of children aged 3 and 4. However, concerns have continued to be raised about the capacity of the sector to absorb the uptick in childcare places, with an extra 85,000 places needed by next year to complete the rollout. International news, and an Israeli court has ruled that a general strike that shut much of the country's economy must end this afternoon. That's as thousands of people in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem filled the streets last night after the killing of 6 hostages in Gaza. Protesters blocked roads while police used water cannons to disperse crowds. IDF soldiers recovered the bodies of the hostages who Israel says were killed moments before troops reached them. Well, today, since this morning, Israel's entire economy has been on strike, and that's in a bid to pressure the country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into accepting a Gaza ceasefire deal after those 6 hostages were shot dead. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer condemned what he described as the horrific and senseless killings. Back home, the Department for Work and Pensions is launching a week of action to encourage the elderly to check their eligibility for pension credit, worth up to £3,900 a year. The campaign will involve charities and local authorities urging the families, friends and neighbours of elderly people to ask them to look into whether they could benefit. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is seeking to soften the blow from her cut on the winter fuel allowance, with a drive to encourage more pensioners to take up benefits they may not know that they're entitled to. And the government has promised to look into dynamic ticket pricing after the cost of tickets for the Oasis reunion tour more than doubled while on sale. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy described the selling of inflated Oasis tickets as depressing. On Saturday, fans of the world-famous band sat in virtual queues for hours, hoping to get their hands on tickets to one of the shows next year. However, when they finally got through, many were met with ticket prices far higher than face value. Some expressed their anger on social media as tickets worth £148 were being sold for £355 on Ticketmaster within hours of release. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:08 and it's a big day in Westminster today. It's a new term, it's a new parliament, big day for the country, I guess. The Tory leadership race is heating up. Candidate James Cleverly is about to set out his campaign. He says he's going to abolish stamp duty in order to get more people on the property ladder. So abolish stamp duty for all homes, I believe, is what he's going to announce very imminently.
Yeah, I mean, that would be absolutely massive, wouldn't it? Rival Kemi Badenoch has also launched her campaign to become the leader of the Conservative Party with a speech earlier this morning. She said that the Tories brought on their own downfall, but she has not put a number on acceptable immigration levels.
Had a cap of tens of thousands when David Cameron came in. We need to ask ourselves, why didn't that work? Rather than just saying, we'll make another promise. Something went wrong there. So it's not just about throwing out numbers and throwing out targets. Something is wrong with the system. So I'm talking about the system. People who are throwing out numbers and saying, oh, well, we'll leave the ECHR and so on, are giving you easy answers. That is how we got in this mess in the first place. I'm not going to do that.
People want numbers, though, don't they?
They do want numbers, but they also want those targets to be hit. And I am sympathetic to the idea that she's got a point, which is she could just stand there and say, right, tens of thousands. And we've heard that before, haven't we? And it's not happened.
True.
So, you know, there is that.
True. It was interesting what she said, actually, about the Home Office. She said it's important that we actually have the right people in there whose skills are actually the right ones for the Home Office. She spoke about how a lot of people in there are, you know, from refugee charities, and their first concern is, of course, looking after refugees and things. Are they going to be the best people for border control? Which you have to be quite tough for.
Well, you've got Sir Matthew Rycroft, who's one of the people in there who got a £30,000 bonus, by the way, just a few months ago for his fantastic work stopping the boats, clearly. But, yeah, I mean, he was also there...
Didn't know the Home Office gave out bonuses.
He was also the civil service head of diversity for a while, and you do wonder whether or not those two roles, when it comes to border security and being the head of diversity, can really marry up.
In terms of the technicals, the first hopeful is going to be eliminated this week. So it'll go from 6 to 5, then it'll go from 5 to 4, and then the 4 that are left will do their big speech at the Tory conference, and then go from there. But to discuss this all is Conservative MP and Tom Tugendhat supporter Patrick Spencer. Patrick, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. It's going to be a big week for the Tory leadership hopefuls. Why Tom?
Gosh, great question. Thanks for having me on, by the way. It's lovely to be here. My first time on GB News as a sitting MP. Look, every one of those candidates is great, in my opinion. I've been fortunate to meet all of them in the last couple of weeks and months. I guess the reason it's Tom for me, though, is I've known him for a long time. He's been a friend for a while, and he's someone that I know quite well. And I think when it comes to picking our new leader, we've got to pick the right person. And we've got to pick someone with the skills, not just to lead the party, but to lead the country. I've been saying to people in my association, I've been talking to friends, I've been talking to voters, I've been talking to people who didn't vote for us. And I've been saying, you know, we need someone who you can trust, someone who you trust with your family, someone you'd be willing to go into battle for, someone you would have a pint down the pub with. And I think Tom is all of those things, someone who's a true Conservative, in every sense of the word, someone who just, you know, you cut him open, he bleeds red, white and blue. He loves this country. He's served it at all parts of his life and his career. And he just embodies all the things that I
Okay,
think.
Patrick, just for our viewers who are watching us on television now, just to say what's going on next to you on our screen is that we are waiting for James Cleverly to start his big leadership pitch, kind of properly, as it were, with a big statement. So we will take that live as and when that comes through to us. But Patrick, you know, we look at Kemi Badenoch, for example, not wanting to put a number on the amount of immigration that she'd find acceptable. Do you think she's wrong to do that?
No, I think she's doing exactly the right thing by talking about it, being honest with people. I think if she's not comfortable pinning her campaign to a specific number, I think that's honest, and that's what members and voters want to hear. Tom's made a commitment to 100,000 legal cap. And I think that's the right thing for the country. It's a legal cap, which means that it was embedded in the last manifesto, and it will be the first time ever that we're bound to something like that. So it will, look, obviously immigration is an incredibly important thing for people across the country. It's a huge issue, and I think it's right that all candidates are talking about it in a sensible way.
And Patrick, what's the deal with this winter fuel allowance? We're hearing that Labour absolutely do not want to have a vote on this. Are the Tories going to push for that today?
Absolutely.
In what way? With a question in Parliament, pushing for a debate? What's going to happen?
There are loads of MPs. I think Esther McVeigh is leading from the front on this. Loads of us are keen to make sure the Labour Party are held to account for something that they said they would do 10 years ago. They then said they wouldn't do. Now they've created a false black hole, and they're using a kind of unfair, scrupulous attack on old age pensioners to meet their policy agenda. So it's deeply duplicitous and something they absolutely need to be held to account for.
OK, all right. Well, look, Patrick, I know that will go down very, very well. A lot of people are saying it wasn't in the manifesto. We should be having a discussion about all of this. It should be put to Parliament. Whether or not Keir Starmer is just very, very afraid, actually, of having a massive backbench rebellion, possibly from the slightly different aspect than the Conservatives, mainly, I would imagine, because I think a lot of Labour MPs just think the state should pay for absolutely everything all the time. So I would be questioning whether or not they think it should be scrapped for those reasons. But thank you very much. It's Patrick Spencer there. He's a Tom Tugendhat supporter, and we are going to be showing you James Cleverly very, very shortly. We think he's going to storm onto stage and try to outdo Kemi Badenoch and outdo everybody else.
I believe it's still the warm-up act at the moment. Of course, you know, the leader-to-be or the leader hopeful has a few people speak before they come to the stage.
Everyone who wanted tickets to see James Cleverly could get them. You know, were people queuing up on Ticketmaster as of, you know, midnight, just desperately trying to get them?
Priti Patel had all her merch. You get a baseball cap with Priti Unite the Party or something like that. Anyway, should we speak with former government special advisor James Price just ahead of this speech from James Cleverly? James, I don't know, may I ask, are you backing a particular horse? Oh, we can't hear James.
James, sorry, we're just going to get your microphone sorted, my good man. And in the meantime, we've got a lot of people getting in touch. Paul's been in touch. He says that the Tories stole his wife's pension for 6 years. Now Labour want to steal our winter fuel payment. The OBR says that it will affect 7 million pensioners. That's Paul's comment. And Annette says, yes, there should definitely be a debate and a vote about scrapping the winter fuel allowance. It's beyond bad that Reeves is taking away this lifeline for millions of pensioners. Do you think that Labour are running scared when it comes to the winter fuel payments? I believe we might be able to. Are we able to reintroduce James Price, are we? I think we can. There he is. Second time lucky, my good man. So, yes, which way do you see this leadership campaign going? Who's the front runner for you?
Yeah, you can't keep me silent for long. Thanks so much for having me back on. I'm not backing anybody yet. I'm still waiting to hear what people are saying. I think it's a really good contest so far. I think that Kemi Badenoch's performance was almost flawless this morning. I think that you guys were right in that immigration is going to be such a big issue for Conservative Party members and also for voters as well. That's going to be a bit of a challenge for her if she doesn't come and nail her colours to the mast on it straight away. But I do like the honesty of saying, no, I'm going to tell you my principles, and then the policies will flow from that. So I think that's very, very strong from her. I think she and Rob Jenrick are probably the favourites, with my namesake, James Cleverly, we're about to hear from coming up in third place at the moment. I think that's where I see it.
OK, well, we're currently watching Grant Shapps, the former minister there, he's clearly on Team Cleverly. People are picking their sides. I'm not sure how many exactly we've heard from, but it does look like Robert Jenrick is currently the front runner. James, what does James Cleverly need to say to persuade people? Is it right he's perceived sort of being in the centre of the party?
He always used to be a kind of good sort of a neo-Thatcherite almost, and I suppose he's finding his way that if you've got people like Rob Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch who are moving sort of further to the right, that he's got that kind of centrist space to move into. I think these kinds of names and monikers are a little bit unhelpful. You know, what does really define right-wing anymore? You know, we're talking sometimes in terms of migration, sometimes in terms of economics. I thought Kemi had a very right-wing speech this morning, because to me, right-wing means not looking to the state to solve all of your problems and to shrink the size of the state and to trust that families and individuals and businesses are able to control their own lives. That sounds right-wing to me, and damn good too.
I do wonder whether or not actually one of the big questions for the Conservatives should be, who is Keir Starmer going to struggle facing the most? Because ultimately that is what it's going to come down to, I think, for members of the public who are active when they watch PMQs and they see the debates going forward, etc. And I do wonder whether or not Kemi Badenoch might actually cause the Labour Party quite a few problems there. So, you know, there's no way, is there, that Keir Starmer or the Labour Party could turn round and, you know, use the old trope of, well, the Tories are racist or that the Tories are sexist or misogyny, or et cetera, because you would have Kemi Badenoch there as a prime example of the fact that they aren't.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, the Labour Party love to look at people based in terms of the colour of their skin or their sexuality or their what else we got, other immutable characteristics like sex or something like that. You know, my old boss, Nadeem Zahawi, wasn't the right kind of brown person for some people in the Labour Party, and many others have had that as well. But I hope that we don't have a contest based on that. One of the few good things about the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was, as he said, that his race wasn't a big part of who he was, and that we didn't make a big song and dance about it. I think that's how it should be. I think that you're right, though, that the party members should be thinking about who can win. I think the other big factor that will hopefully be more and more of a dividing line. It's not a sexy, interesting, exciting thing, but it should be. It's about system reform. Kemi was very good on that. Rob Jenrick has been very good on that. And they've talked about the need to change the civil service to actually get things done, because it's been so darn difficult. And I know this from experience. There are more grey hairs in this beard than there should be, because it's so difficult to get things done inside government. And that should be one of the big questions as well.
We've still got Grant Shapps on our screens as we await James Cleverly to take to the stage to deliver his message to the Tory party and also to the country, I suppose. We're hearing that one of the things he's going to say is that stamp duty should absolutely be abolished across the board, so no one buying a property in this country would have to pay that particular tax. Why do you think he's gone for that?
I think it's great. I think that in the abstract, all of these policies that the candidates are coming out with are really good. I think the problem we should do, though, is to make sure they've got the time and space to work through a kind of coherent set of policies. I think this is something that even the Thatcher government in waiting didn't do as well as we now think that they did. When you read memoirs and things from the time, it still felt that they weren't nearly as prepared as they perhaps should have been when they went into government. So it's good to see that the different policies that are being announced sort of sets people's priorities. But again, I like the fact that Kemi Badenoch was talking about her principles and that we should get those things first. Because, you know, when David Cameron came in, he was talking all, you know, sweetness and light and hug a hoodie and those things. Then the financial crash happened, and the Tories remembered they were meant to be the party of sound money and fiscal responsibility, which is exactly right. And we should get some of that back as well. And to be fair to Cleverly, he did say that almost unsayable, which is that you need to talk about spending reductions. No party likes to do that. We've seen this with this winter fuel announcement from Labour, which I think was actually quite brave. I do think we should means test benefits that people get, and that you shouldn't necessarily just give a carte blanche handout to people just because they're a certain age.
No, James, because that's actually our big call out today, and it gives me the opportunity to just bring in a couple of more of our viewers, actually. So, like Joan, for example, says that she feels as though the winter fuel payment should be put to a vote in Parliament. Gareth says Labour think pensioners can't strike. When it's cold in the winter, can 10 million of us turn up at the House of Commons or our MPs' homes to keep warm as they keep their fuel allowance? Do you think that, you know, that there is obviously a case for means testing it, and that is something that a lot of people can get their heads around? But is there not a sense that this is the kind of thing that should have been put to a vote in Parliament, James?
It certainly should have been in their manifesto and should have been discussed if it was something they were talking about. And you can see that, I think it was the leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell, saying there'd have been a financial crash if we didn't do this, which itself is complete and utter rot. So I think that yes, it would be nice to see this sort of stuff.
That's actually quite outrageous, isn't it? That statement from Lucy Powell, because well, it's just simply untrue. And also when you put that next to the, 13 billion pounds given to public sector pay rises, I mean, come on, how can she even make that argument?
I can only assume that this is all part of a devious Labour strategy to get all the most absolutely terrible news out of the way as early as possible and hope that the British people have short enough memories that they can come back to bribing us with our own money when it comes to the next election. Because let's never forget, there's no such thing as government money. There's only taxpayers' money, as Margaret Thatcher once said. Let's hope that people do actually remember all the horrible things that Labour are doing. And as you say, they're inventing this black hole because they're real bosses in this country. They're not the public, not even the people who voted for them almost by default because the Tories were too busy fighting each other, but their bosses are the union paymasters. We see that from this outrageous Ofsted move and the fact that the trade unions in teaching are also saying no more times tables or grammar tests. I mean, ludicrous. And you see it in the trains union strikes, you see it with doctors as well. And this is a problem. Who governs Britain was the old question, and it seems like the same old Labour Party would answer that question, the trade unions, rather than the British people.
Yeah, and I appreciate that now people who are running for the Conservative leadership, and just to emphasise again, we are looking at the stage here at James Cleverly's launch proper, and we are waiting for him to take to that stage. As soon as he does, we'll take you live to that. But, James, I can't help but wonder whether or not actually a lot of the incoming Tory leaders' manifesto will have been written by him because it's going to be the reversal of everything Labour have done.
Let's cut in, because James
must go live to him now, see what he has to say as he sets out his bold vision for Britain.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey! Oh, come on, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shivani, for what you said. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that you and others from the 2024 intake have given me, and I'm very proud of your support. And Grant, thank you so very, very much. Your experience is really missed around the cabinet table, and I'm incredibly grateful for you to be part of Team Cleverly. And we must make sure that we get the experience that we lost at the last general election, and the new MPs elected for the first time, and those fantastic candidates who were not elected this year. We must get them on the government benches once again after the next general election. And to do that, we need voters to see that the Conservative Party is focused on them and not just focused on ourselves. The parliamentary party needs to lead by example. We must be unified. We must be disciplined. And unity is not the easy option. It is the harder option. But we can choose to unite, or we can choose to stay in opposition. Because people don't vote for divided parties. They don't trust divided parties. They don't even listen to divided parties. So we must unite if we want the British people to listen to us again. So when they are fed up, as they inevitably will be, with Starmer's inept, high taxing, red tape loving, big state, crony-filled government, they will look to us again to be the change that they want to see in this country. Now, I've spoken on behalf of the government for 6 years. Now I plan to take us back into government. I've been a team player under 4 different prime ministers, but now I plan to lead the team. And I've defended other people's decisions and policies, but now I plan to make those policies. And today, I will set out my vision for this great country, and I'll show why I am uniquely suited to unite the party, to win at the next general election and to deliver for the British people once again. We need to recognise that it's not enough for a Conservative leader just to believe in Conservative values. It's not enough just to state those Conservative values. We need to sell Conservative values to the country once again. Because our party is at its best when it provides clear and a positive vision for voters, when we provide the right solutions for the challenges that our country and our world face. Let's look back through the history of our great party. Robert Peel saw inequality. He saw the inequality between those with the wealth to buy staff to protect them and the poor who could not. So he created the Metropolitan Police to protect the poor. Disraeli saw injustice. He saw the injustice of children doing dangerous work, drinking disease-ridden water. So he brought in the Factory Act and the Public Health Act. Churchill saw fascism and stood up to it. Thatcher saw economic defeatism and reversed it. That decisiveness is what we need to show now, and I will. Of course, the challenges of today are different to the challenges of the past. But we must have the courage of our Conservative forebears to tackle the great problems of our time. And let me set out what I believe are the three great challenges that we face, that we must, and that I will, with your support, tackle head on. The first of these challenges is our deeply unstable world. Now, the warning lights were flashing red well before Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And the sad fact is that there are few reasons to believe that the world is going to be any safer or more secure anytime soon. Authoritarian regimes are increasingly trying to undermine our way of life. The freedoms that we cherish and the international rules that have kept us safe are under threat. And I have seen the threats that our country faces. I have been in charge of MI6, of MI5, of GCHQ. I've been to Ukraine. I've been to Taiwan, to the Baltic, to the Caucasus. I've looked at Russian soldiers occupying land that isn't theirs. I was the first foreign minister to visit Israel after the 7th of October atrocities. Now, when Grant was Secretary of State for Defence, he set out a timetable to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. But Starmer, in an act of vandalism, has scrapped that pledge. Now, I supported Grant when he made the bold decision then, but I will go further. And as he said, I will commit, as Prime Minister, to spend 3% of GDP on defence. Because you cannot penny pinch your way to peace. Security is delivered through strength, by planning for the worst, not hoping for the best. And we will send a signal to our enemies and our allies alike that the UK is prepared, that we will not leave the field. And just to put that commitment in perspective, we currently spend less than 2.5% of our GDP on defence, but 10 times that much on our health system, welfare system, and on pensions. Starmer says that we cannot afford to spend more on defence. I say we cannot afford not to. The second major challenge that faces us is global migration. And we must restore our credibility on this issue to win back the voters that switched to Reform and switched to the Lib Dems and Labour and those that stayed at home. As Home Secretary, I delivered the reforms that are currently cutting net migration by half. I didn't talk tough, I took action. I negotiated with the Chancellor, with the Health Secretary, with the Education Secretary, to achieve the changes in our visa regime which are currently bringing those numbers down. And we have to be more honest in our conversation about the trade-offs with regard to immigration. And that means changing how we measure our wealth. It means using GDP per capita as the metric for our economy so that the Treasury cannot mask low growth with high migration. Rising GDP overall is meaningless if the wealth per person is falling. So we need to control legal migration. And when I was Home Secretary, I did. Under my leadership, Home Office applications fell. The backlog was cleared. The grant rate came down. Deportations increased. I didn't talk tough, I took action. And when we deal with illegal migration, I stand by what I have always said. We need to have a deterrent. And as leader, as Prime Minister, I will use my contacts and my reputation with Rwanda to resurrect that incredibly important partnership. And more than that, I will rebuild a relationship so badly damaged by Labour's arrogant and callous disregard to the diplomatic niceties that bind the world. To inform the media that they were scrapping this partnership before they had the courage to inform the Rwandan government is unacceptable, and that would never have happened under my leadership. We need to recognise there are currently around 280 million people on the move globally. And so we must, of course, address why people move. We have influence on the international stage, and we must use it. At the UN, at the G20, at the G7, at the World Bank, we must, of course, tackle the drivers of mass movement: war, famine, persecution, economic failure, because in this portfolio, as in so many others, prevention is better than cure. And to those people who we do welcome into our country, we must make it clear. Our welcome comes with modest but non-negotiable conditions. Tolerance isn't something that you demand of others, it is something that you are duty-bound to give. Our laws cannot be trumped by cultural sensitivities. Play by the rules, work hard, and you can expect our thanks and support. Break the rules, abuse our hospitality, and you can expect us to take action. The third major challenge that we must address is a crisis in the confidence in capitalism. We handed Labour a growing economy, the fastest economy growth in the G7. But compared to historic levels, and indeed compared to African or Asian economic growth rates, we are not doing anywhere near well enough. We need to unlock real growth again, and we need to show young people that free markets, not planned economies, are their friend. We need to turn them into capitalists, because too many people think that high taxes help them rather than hold them down. They think that more regulation protects them rather than benefiting incumbent suppliers. Protectionism drives up costs for them, drives down choice for them, benefits the already rich and harms the aspirational poor. And I will make boosting our economic growth a defining mission of our party. And I will make sure selling the benefits of free markets to a new generation is a key part of that. Because growth does not come from more quangos and nationalising services. It comes from less red tape, lower taxes and a dynamic leadership. And we know this is true because we have evidence. Look at Docklands under Heseltine and Margaret Thatcher, the Olympic Park under Boris, and Tees Works under Ben Houchin. What I saw on the Tees Valley was incredible, stimulating an estimated 20,000 new jobs, attracting an annual £1 billion investment into the regional and local economy. And these low tax, low regulation zones is what I want to see more of around the whole country. We used to have a one in, one out rule for regulation. But the truth is, we strayed from the path of righteousness. So we've got to get back on track, maybe even go further, having a one in, two out approach to regulation. Because we must empower the innovators and the wealth creators. Because this son of an entrepreneur will make us the party of business once again. So we need to do more to empower the private sector, not the state, to drive our economy. Ben Houchin has done exactly that in Teesside. This is the Conservative economic model. And Churchill, as in so many things, was absolutely right when he said, a nation taxing its way to prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle. People will vote for Starmer's statism if they don't feel that capitalism is working for them. And for many people, especially the young, it isn't working for them. Home ownership has been a cornerstone of the Conservative Party offer since the war. And just as Margaret Thatcher enabled council tenants to buy their homes in the 1980s, we need to give young people a stake in our society and in our growing economy. That is the Conservative, that is the capitalist approach. And it was right that we cut stamp duty for first-time buyers, but we should go further. It should be our mission to abolish stamp duty on homes altogether. It's a bad tax. It stifles transactions in an already illiquid housing market. People from downsizing. And like all taxes, it ultimately increases the cost to buyers. And of course, we need to build lots more homes, and we will. But we should be building upwards in our cities rather than outwards. If our Georgian forebears could see the beauty in 3- and 4-story houses, then why on earth can't we? So adding an extra story to a building should enjoy a presumption of planning consent, because it would support small local businesses, would pump money into the local economy, and it would be more environmentally and aesthetically sustainable. Now, we must provide Conservative answers to the problems that people face. An unstable world, global migration, and a crisis in confidence in capitalism. And we must get our act together as a party to provide the Conservative solutions to these problems. The solutions of the left don't, won't, and will never work. And when they try to impose them, they harm the very people they are meant to help. So we have to do things differently, and that means being honest and realistic about the role of the state and what it can and should do and what it should not and cannot do. The state should focus on doing a few things well, not everything badly. Now, of course, only the state can provide police forces and armed forces, and both need to be effective and well-funded. And we must, and of course we will, support the people who fall on hard times or suffer from ill health. But our welfare budget has spiralled out of control, and we must bring it down, and I will bring it down. And we must also be honest about the trade-offs. We cannot nationalise all risks or eradicate all difficulties. The state should not always be the first port of call when problems arise. We should enable self-reliance, family-first resilience, and community solutions. Tax and subsidise cannot be our mantra anymore. So we must think and act like Conservatives once again. Demonstrate that we understand the challenges that people in our country face now and provide the solutions to give them a brighter and better future. And we accomplished lots in government, but our divisions and our behaviour obscured our victories and amplified our mistakes. We spent too much time talking tough and not enough time taking action. We spoke lots about what we were going to do, but almost never about why we were going to do it. This is the opposite of how I have acted in my career, and it is the opposite of how I intend to lead. I will tackle the problems in front of us with conservative solutions, and I will make the UK the greatest power in Europe, strong in defence of our people, our allies and our interests, strong in defence of our values and our principles, strong on the international stage and secure and prosperous at home. I don't accept the shared declinism of Starmer and Farage, who both believe that our best days are behind us. Starmer thinks it was better before we left the EU. Farage thinks it was better before we joined the EU. They're both wrong. I know that our best years can be ahead of us, but only if we replace this useless Labour government. And in order to win again, we need a leader who can unite the party, and I'm the best place to do that. Because I'm the best place to do that, because to command loyalty, you have to have displayed loyalty. And I have always served the leader of the day, never briefed against colleagues, and focused relentlessly on delivering for the British people. And in order to win again, we need to unite around conservative principles. And I'm the best place to do that, because I've never chopped and changed my political position or philosophy. I have actually reformed public services. I've actually cut spending. I've driven better performance. When I led the London Fire Authority, when I led at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, when I led at the Home Office, and as Grant said, when I led as chairman of the party, helping to deliver a record majority at the 2019 general election. And in order to win again, we need a leader who can communicate with Conservative voters. Those voters that we kept, those voters that we lost, and those who will be voting for us perhaps for the first time ever at the next general election. And I know that I'm the best placed to do that. I'm the most experienced and effective communicator that the party has got. And you cannot communicate your policies or our values if you hide from the media. So I know that I can unite the Conservative Party with sound conservative principles, delivered in a positive, optimistic and energetic way to show that we can get us back to where we need to be. I know that I'm the best placed to lead our party as leader of the opposition and then our country as Prime Minister. And I know that I can lead us to that better future. And the time is now. There is no time to lose. So let's get to work. Thank you.
OK, well, there is James Cleverly, former Home Secretary, launching his leadership campaign for Tory leader. He had three overarching themes, didn't he, in that speech? He talked about an unsafe world, the need to boost defence spending to 3%. Talked about immigration, wants to bring back the Rwanda deportation plan. That's a promise. Interesting what he said about GDP per capita being so important when assessing the impact of immigration. And also spoke about a crisis of confidence when it comes to capitalism.
Yeah, Yeah, and bringing down the welfare budget as well. I think it was particularly interesting for me where he said about how GDP per capita, so how wealthy we all are as individuals, and that should be the main driver of whether or not immigration is actually working. That should be the main driver of our economics going forward, and we should not keep masking that with an overall bigger picture of how many people we've welcomed into Britain. He also said that laws shouldn't be trumped by cultural sensitivity. So if somebody arrives over here and then we shouldn't be bending to their whims, I suppose. I think a lot of that will be quite popular.
Yeah.
Just on a personal level, though, did you find that speech particularly dynamic? Was it zippy? Was he the kind of person you would follow into battle? Is he the kind of person you think is going to be able to hit Sir Keir Starmer with zingers at the dispatch box? I thought he grew into the speech, and I think he came across as what I suspect he probably is, which is quite a nice guy. But I'm not sure he's got that winning personality.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? One of the themes that we've heard from most of these leadership contenders is uniting the party. People don't listen to divided parties. People don't vote for divided parties. James cleverly certainly thinks he's the man to unite the party. He spoke about how he never briefed against colleagues. He spoke about how he didn't say nasty things in the media about colleagues or try to undermine them, etc., etc. He's a loyal person. That's his pitch to the parliamentary party, because he's got to get the MPs on side and he's got to get the members on side before he even thinks about getting the country on side. We're going to catch up with former government advisor, special advisor, I should say, James Price, who I believe is still hanging on the line for us and has been listening to James cleverly. James, what did you make of that? 3 strong themes.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good speech. I was really interested, Patrick, just to hear you say there that you didn't think he came across as the kind of dynamic leader necessarily. I wonder if this is a sort of tonal shift from James Cleverly, because he's known as being really fun, really loud. He mentioned in that speech that he believes he's the party's best communicator. He's full of jokes when you meet him in person, often quite rude ones, perhaps from his army background days. And so perhaps this is him trying to kind of change and adopt a slightly different tone, maybe a prime ministerial tone. And it would be interesting to see if that works, if that's landed well or not with your viewers, because one of his great strengths is that he's such a personable, normal bloke. I can't repeat some of the anecdotes of stories I've shared with him, maybe this time of day, but he's very funny, very human, very personable guy. And so interesting that.
James, he did get into a bit of trouble not that long ago for making a joke about spiking his wife's drink.
Well, he also got clobbered at the dispatch box for allegedly saying that, and again, I can't repeat this, but the Rwanda scheme was bonkers, to paraphrase there. What he said there is he'd bring back Rwanda, he'd do a lot to claw back diplomatic relations with the Rwandan government because arrogantly Labour decided to tell the media they were going to scrap it before they told Rwanda. Do you think bringing back Rwanda is a winner?
I think we'll see by the time the next election comes around that there may even be some other European countries who have adopted similar policies when it comes to this. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter if it's Rwanda or whatever it is, but you need to have some kind of disincentive for people entering countries illegally. And the idea of being sent somewhere else to be processed, that's a disincentive. The stronger one, of course, is something that Labour has said that they're going to scrap, which is this idea that if you enter the United Kingdom illegally, you will never, ever, under any circumstances, be allowed to stay here. And that's a really, really powerful disincentive that Labour have got rid of. So if it goes hand in hand with that, I think it'll be a winning policy from him. I think one of the other interesting things is that he can boast, unlike some other people, that he has been able to get migration numbers down. It does make you wonder why, of course, Rishi Sunak went so late with the election. My bigger concern, and we talked about this just before his speech, I think one of the big underrated issues that the next Conservative leader and hopefully Prime Minister, as far as I'm concerned, will have to face is the ability to make the civil service get things done. And I think that takes a lot of quite major fundamental reform that will be quite boring, quite technical. I wonder if Mr. Cleverly, because he's been successful in the Home Office in getting migration numbers down, thinks, no, it's okay, you just need someone like me in order to do it and I can make the system work. And I think that would be wrong if he comes to that kind of interpretation.
Well, didn't he also over-egg what he was able to do in the Home Office with these changes on immigration? He appeared to claim, and correct me if I'm wrong, he appeared to claim that he cut it in half or put in place the measures to cut it in half. Where's the evidence for that?
But I think that there's a lot of fun that can always be had with numbers out there. We're seeing fewer Ukrainians coming, seeing fewer Hong Kongers, fewer Afghan translators, which accounted for some of this. And I think a lot of it was, of course, whether you include student numbers in this cap. And it's not just about the headline numbers of people coming. It's people coming and then not leaving again when they're supposed to. And the kind of fundamental reforms there. It's interesting that almost all of the candidates are now talking about immigration, though. I think that's very, very important. And some of them have obviously got experience further back in their family of the good that this country can bring to migrants. And it was interesting that he was laying down a bit of a marker of saying, when you come to this country, you have to be tolerant yourself rather than demand things of others. I think that was an excellent point to be made.
Yeah, exactly. Look, he did say that you can expect us to take strong action, and I know that everyone, I think, of our viewers will have been shouting at television screens going, you're going to tell us what that action is, because if we can't deport people and we're not locking them up, then what's going to happen? Just to zoom out, final question to you, I think, James, time-wise, but the bigger picture here, the latest opinion polls here, that I've seen anyway, by BMG Research, show that Labour is now down to a lead of 4% in the polls. So Labour on 30%, the Conservatives on 26%, Reform on 19%. Bear in mind that there is not currently an opposition. You know, could we be looking genuinely at a one-term government here?
I mean, goodness me, I hope so. But it depends where we said this earlier on. Is it the fact that Labour are just getting in all the difficult stuff as early as possible and then offering people, you know, goodies and things? Oh, look, haven't things got better under our watch in sort of 4.5 years' time? It's the famous anecdote about the Iron Lady herself. She'd be told opinion polls midway through a parliament and said, no, we're not far enough behind right now, because she knew that you had to do things that were in the short term unpalatable and unpopular in order to get lasting change. But she was doing big structural reforms, the kind we need to have, whereas Labour seemed to be just taking people's money and giving it to trade unions and not much else. Look, I really hope we can do it. And I think, frankly, all the people we've got in this election for the Conservative leadership so far are coming out with great ideas. Most of them seem to have diagnosed some of the fundamental problems. And they do sound to be making more sense than all the previous Tory Prime Ministers we've had for a while.
And they've all mentioned, are the people listening? They want people to start listening again to the Conservatives. Thank you very much indeed, James Price, former Special Advisor in the last Conservative government. Well, we've got lots more coming up. We will continue on Tory leadership, but we're also going to be talking about the winter fuel allowance. Should there be a vote in Parliament? Labour don't want one.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update here on GB News from the Met Office. Big thunderstorms likely in places this afternoon. By no means everywhere catching a downpour, but where they are forming, dropping a lot of rain in a short space of time. It's a bit of a messy picture with low pressure sitting across the country, but also a whole tangle of weather fronts all drifting up from the south. That's why it's still quite warm and humid. We are seeing some big downpours developing this afternoon, particularly over parts of mid and East Wales into the West Midlands, and especially northeast Scotland. Much of eastern England staying dry. It may well brighten up here, and still quite a warm and humid feel, 24, maybe 25 in one or two places. It's cooler where we've got the clouds and the outbreaks of rain, particularly persistent over western Scotland. But it's really in the northeast of Scotland where we're looking at some pretty nasty thunderstorms breaking out and spreading slowly northwards. A lot of spray surface water on the roads here, the potential for some flooding as well. The rain maybe not as heavy further west, but it is still a pretty damp day across western Scotland and the east of Northern Ireland. Then another zone where we could catch some big thunderstorms, parts of Wales and the West Midlands especially. So again, that could cause some disruption. The thunderstorm warning remains in place until midnight. We'll see them drifting further north, perhaps into parts of northern England during the evening time as well. But generally, it does turn a bit drier as we go through the night, certainly in western Scotland and the east of Northern Ireland. Some showers perhaps coming into the southeast. Still pretty warm, pretty humid across these eastern areas, but further west starting to turn a little fresher overnight, some places down into single figures. And for many, there'll be a cooler, fresher feel on Tuesday. Still a lot of cloud over the Midlands, and there will still be some heavy showers potentially, most likely over East Anglia and the southeast, but generally a sunnier day for northern England, Wales and southwest England. A few showers coming into the northwest, and as I said, starting to turn a little bit fresher and cooler by the afternoon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This
This is your chance to...
Mother transitioning and then the transitioning the son as well. It's interesting that, you know, it's almost like a religion. You get, you know, if you're a Christian, your kids are probably going to be Christian. If you're, you know, Hindu, your kids are probably going to be Hindu. And if you're transgender, your kids are probably going to be transgender.
There's absolutely a causation there. We see plenty of times in videos. This is exactly it. Like, and also we see the children of celebrities and people in particularly sort of liberal environments. It doesn't happen in some village in Indonesia or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, there's no such thing as a trans child. There's no such thing as non-binary. What there is are people with mental health issues and parents who want a virtual signal and also want to brainwash their children. This is an egregious example of that, where she was basically taking him to Disneyland, but he couldn't get on a ride unless he wore princess shoes. I mean, really evil, horrible stuff. You know, forced to wear a dress on his birthday. You know, just really nasty stuff. Now, here's the thing. You talk about the court going to him. No, that's not what happened. He took 800 pages of documentary evidence. He took 8 hours of police body camera footage showing this mental behaviour from the mother. And guess what? The courts ruled that the mum got him. They ruled against him. The only reason that he got custody of his child is because, thank God, a child protective services officer randomly got involved, looked into it themselves, and that's how he eventually got custody of the child. So the courts in America are utterly captured.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 2nd of September. I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Emily Carver.
So the race for the next Tory leader has absolutely kicked off today. Kemi Badenoch was the first to go out, but refused to say whether the level of immigration she'd like to see would, she didn't want to put a number on it, put it that way.
Yeah, didn't want to put a number on it. Anyway, next up, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly. He vowed to bring back the Rwanda deterrent and said he was uniquely suited to unite his party and win the next general election. Do people want Rwanda back?
And dodging a vote, Labour are accused of hiding from scrutiny as MPs are now demanding a vote on the scrapping of the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners.
Yes, and rise of the right. Germany's right-wing anti-immigration party, the AfD, storms to victory in a key state election. This just days after Keir Starmer urged progressives on the continent to fend off the threat of snake oil populists.
Yeah, so 2 Tory big hitters have set their stalls out today. Kemi Badenoch, though, did refuse to put a number on the amount of immigration she would find acceptable. Many people will think, well, we've had quotas in the past and they've failed. But meanwhile, James Cleverly, he also took a strong view, though, on immigration, didn't he? Had a couple of bits and bobs to say.
He did. He spoke about how, you know, the Treasury pulls on the lever of immigration and they say it's fantastic for GDP. We need it for GDP. But actually, it's GDP per capita that he says we need to keep an eye on because that is our quality of life. Individual wealth, what actually matters rather than the huge number of the entire country. So that was an interesting point that he made. Bringing back Rwanda, now that will divide Conservatives as well as the country, of course. So that was an interesting one. He says that he's the man to bring immigration down. It's all down to him, that visas are down and the like. But talking about how there's a crisis of confidence when it comes to capitalism, talking about defence, how it needs to be 3%, otherwise we'll regret it. Yeah. Kemi Badenoch also had a lot to say. She didn't just swerve that question on immigration. Lots about personal responsibility, that the state shouldn't be the first port of call and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not all about the Tories and their leadership hopefuls, because Labour are in quite a bit of trouble. It looks as though the latest polls have them at a lead of just 4%. So that's an almighty crash, really, considering they won a stonking majority just a couple of months ago. So is it because Keir Starmer wants to just keep controlling our lives? We're going to have a look at that. Doesn't want to vote on the winter fuel payments in Parliament, despite the fact that it wasn't in their manifesto. Talk of Labour banning things like takeaways near schools. Well, what about the shops that are already near the schools? They're going to have to shut down now. There's all sorts of stuff going on.
Can't smoke outside a nightclub?
Yeah, can't smoke outside a nightclub.
Can't have a vape. Not a disposable one, anyway.
Want to renegotiate a deal with the European Union that presumably also won't be put into Parliament.
Oh, Oh, and now they want to get involved with your Oasis tickets.
Oh, yeah.
No, you can't charge any more than what they say, maybe. Well, they're going to be looking at dynamic pricing anyway. So that's the sort of theme of today. There's lots of control going on, isn't there? Let us know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. But yes, that big question, whether there should be a vote on the winter fuel allowance. Some of you saying there's no point, they'll win it anyway. But perhaps it does need a debate.
I'm not so sure. Well, talking of control, someone who's always in control of your bulletins is Tatiana, and she has them now.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Leadership contender James Cleverly's launched his Tory bid this afternoon, vowing to bring back the Rwanda plan, as he also said Conservative answers are needed to solve the most challenging problems facing our country. Mr Cleverly highlighted the need for us to remake the argument for capitalism, to boost economic growth and give younger people a stake in society. He also said he'd increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. And on illegal migration, Mr Cleverly says we need to have a deterrent.
I will use my contacts and my reputation with Rwanda to resurrect that incredibly important partnership. And more than that, I will rebuild a relationship so badly damaged by Labour's arrogant and callous disregard to the diplomatic niceties that bind the world. To inform the media that they were scrapping this partnership before they had the courage to inform the Rwandan government is unacceptable.
Well, Kemi Badenoch's also launched her Tory leadership campaign today, calling for change in the Conservative Party. The Shadow Communities Secretary and contender to replace Rishi Sunak says her party has to focus on renewal to be ready to return to power. Ms Badenoch used the speech to also accuse Labour of pulling the wool over the eyes of the public, insisting that it's time for something new.
We can't just sit around pointing out how terrible Labour are. That's just not good enough. And we can't just keep having the same policy arguments from the last Parliament. We are not in power, we lost. Labour will fail. And when that time comes and the British people are looking for change, we have to be that change. We have to focus on renewal. The renewal of our party, our politics and our thinking. And it starts with principles. Principles are the fundamentals that give us direction, unity and certainty. They must underpin everything we do.
In other news, the Prime Minister has said the scrapping of single-phrase inspection headline grades for schools in England will be a relief for parents. Previously, Ofsted awarded 1 of 4 headline grades to schools it inspects, and those are outstanding, good, requires improvement and inadequate. The Department for Education says for inspections this academic year, parents will see 4 grades across the existing subcategories, those being quality of education, behaviour and attitudes, personal development and leadership and management. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has told reporters today that the death of head teacher Ruth Perry made the need for Ofsted reform absolutely clear. The Prime Minister says it'll hold schools accountable.
I've got a mission for our government, which is to make sure that every single child, whatever their background, wherever they come from, has the best possible education. And this move today is about driving up standards, making sure that we've got a richer picture so parents can see in a more accountable way the real strength of a school and making sure we've got the improvements in to catch schools quickly. So this is all about driving up standards. And I'm really pleased that we're able to do it so quickly.
From today, the government will fund 15 hours per week of free childcare for eligible working parents whose children are between 9 months old and 2 years old. The 15 hours per week is in addition to an existing offer to parents of 2-year-olds and 30 hours of free childcare already offered to parents of children aged 3 and 4. However, concerns have continued to be raised about the capacity of the sector to absorb the uptick in childcare places, with an extra 85,000 places needed by next year to complete the rollout. Now, an Israeli court has ruled that a general strike that shut much of the country's economy must end this afternoon. Israel's entire economy has been on strike since the morning in a bid to pressure the country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into accepting a Gaza ceasefire deal after 6 hostages were shot dead in Gaza. IDF soldiers recovered the bodies of the hostages who Israel says were killed moments before troops reached them. Back home, the Department for Work and Pensions is launching a week of action to encourage the elderly to check their eligibility for pension credit, worth up to £3,900 annually. The campaign will involve charities and local authorities urging the families, friends and neighbours of elderly people to ask them to look into whether they could benefit. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is seeking to soften the blow from her cut on the winter fuel allowance, with a drive to encourage more pensioners to take up benefits they may not know that they're entitled to. The Prime Minister has said today that he doesn't want to cut winter fuel allowance, but called it a tough decision made to stabilise the economy. And the government has promised to look into dynamic ticket pricing after the cost of tickets for the Oasis reunion tour more than doubled while on sale. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy described the selling of inflated Oasis tickets as depressing. On Saturday, fans of the world-famous band sat in virtual queues for hours on end, hoping to get their hands on tickets to one of the shows next year. However, when they finally got through, many were met with ticket prices far higher than face value. Some people have expressed their anger on social media as tickets worth £148 were being sold for £355 on Ticketmaster within hours of release. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
OK, welcome along. So, loads on today. We are going to start with the big news from a couple of the Tory leadership hopefuls. So we had Kemi Badenoch earlier this morning, setting her stall out. We've had James Cleverly as well today. So James Cleverly has now basically come out and said quite a lot of things, really. One about reducing immigration, how we need to make sure that we are stronger on people who come here and expect to impose maybe their own kind of culture and set of norms. We need to be looking at GDP per capita, all of that stuff. We're going to get stuck into Keir Starmer soon, though, because he's facing serious allegations about ignoring the winter fuel payments, not putting that to Parliament, running scared. But I can play you now a clip of our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, putting a question to James Cleverly just a few moments ago.
You talked about young people. We know now that people aren't likely to vote for the Conservatives until they're well in their 50s, more likely to vote until they're well in their 50s. You've mentioned stamp duty, but how are you going to get the under 50s back looking at the Conservatives? Because a cut in stamp duty, I mean, many people would say that's just going to put prices up. It's going to be expensive. It's going to take more than that, isn't it?
So taking a big tax burden off a financial transaction will not push the price up, quite the opposite. And the point is that there are two things that we need to address when we talk to younger voters and we try to attract younger voters. One is policy, and I've given an indication of my desired direction of travel, easing regulation and red tape, reducing the cost of products and services so that young people particularly have got a credible chance to get on the housing ladder. Making sure we build, and we do need to build, and we do need to build up where there are already transport links, where there's infrastructure, where there's employment. Learning from our forebears who understood that 1- and 2-storey houses are not best use of land, and actually 3- and 4-storey houses, for example, can significantly increase the supply of housing and still do so in a beautiful and aesthetically pleasing way. So there's policy stuff, but the other thing we've got to get right is tone. Now, you will never upset a room full of Tories by saying that you were a big fan of Margaret Thatcher. I am a big fan of Margaret Thatcher, by the way. See? But perhaps more than that, my real political hero of that era was Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan, particularly in his re-election campaign, took a staunchly conservative agenda, but delivered it in an optimistic, passionate, upbeat, energetic way. And we should learn from that. We've never been the nasty party, I've never subscribed to that, but we have turned into the grumpy party. and young people are turned off by that. So let's change that. Let's be optimistic. Let's focus on them, attract them to the party, listen to their voices and deliver on their aspirations, and that's what I would do.
All right, really interesting that. And another big thing that James Cleverly did say, that he wanted to remove stamp duty on all properties, try to get people on the property ladder. I do think that probably will have a massive, massive impact, especially when it does come to younger people, people who are, by and large, really struggling to get on the property ladder. That will be a really big incentive.
It will be, but as long as you build more houses, otherwise it will stoke demand, property prices could go up as a result. Anyway, rival Kemi Badenoch has launched her campaign too, as she wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party. She had a speech earlier this morning. Now, she says the Tories brought on their own downfall, but she did refuse to put a number on what she would see as an acceptable level of immigration.
At a cap of tens of thousands when David Cameron came in, we need to ask ourselves, why didn't that work? Rather than just saying, we'll make another promise. Something went wrong there. So it's not just about throwing out numbers and throwing out targets. Something is wrong with the system. So I'm talking about the system. People who are throwing out numbers and saying, oh, well, we'll leave the ECHR and so on, are giving you easy answers. That is how we got in this mess in the first place. I'm not going to do that.
OK, well, Kemi Badenoch there talking about the processes and who's within the Home Office rather than putting a number on what she'd like to see immigration. Now, the first hopeful in the leadership contest will be eliminated this week, then another one will be eliminated, and then 4 will go to the Tory conference and try and garner some votes there. Anyway, we're going to speak to a former Labour MP.
Yes, we are, indeed. Sean Simon. Sean, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Look, we're hearing now all the various different Tories setting their stall out, etc. I do wonder if Keir Starmer's made it quite easy for them, though. Just do the opposite of whatever he's done. He's now slumped in the polls. He's only 4% ahead of the Tories and he hasn't got an opposition yet. What's going on?
It's really difficult for them, isn't it? I almost feel sorry for them. It's so hard for them to get a hearing. I mean, we just had an election in which, everybody knows that the overwhelming dynamic in this election was just everybody wanting to get rid of the Tories, and that was very recent. And they know that that's where the country still is. So they know that actually just kind of knee-jerk criticising the Labour government that's just been elected sounds a bit hollow. Kemi Badenoch said quite rightly, I think, there's no point us just rehearsing all the arguments that we've been rehearsing for months and years in government because we just lost. They need to start again, and they need to look to the future and think about what it is that might tempt people to vote Tory in 5 or 10 years' time.
Well, I mean, but we're looking at the polls. The Labour Party aren't doing too well under Keir Starmer's leadership since he was voted in. 4 points between the Conservatives and the Labour Party now. Surely the Conservatives should be focusing on what Labour is doing wrong if the public, the polling's gone south.
Well, I think the Labour leadership will be relatively relaxed about that poll. Just a few weeks after kind of winning the election by a landslide, and with many years to go before the next election, the Tory leadership hopefuls, as I say, they've got a really difficult task, and actually, James Cleverly, Kemi, these are quite a few. They're quite thoughtful people, and you can see them trying to have an intelligent conversation, but they're having it in a vacuum. I mean, they've got, 120 MPs. They've constructed this weird, elaborate, multi-part system. I don't know if that was designed to try and make it a bit more interesting, where they're going to chip from 6 till 4, and then after the conference, it'll go from 4 to 2. The conference, is going to be half empty this year, I think. The really hard part for them is just finding anybody in the country who cares.
OK.
About anything.
All right. Well, look, this is obviously the process that decided to go out, and we'll be keeping you up to date on all of that. But I'm quite keen to get your views on whether or not Keir Starmer is absolutely running scared now, essentially, of old people. because he wants to scrap the winter fuel payment allowance for millions of pensioners. People are saying it wasn't in the manifesto. It's going to affect around 10 million people or so. Why doesn't he put that to a vote in Parliament?
Well, it's just not the kind of financial measure that normally would get put to debated separately and put to a special vote in Parliament. It's just going to be treated in the normal way that these things normally are. Obviously, it's the job of the Tories and the Lib Dems to say, "Oh, we want a debate, we want a vote." I mean, they say that for everything, and it's routine that the government says, "Well, no, we'll just carry on doing things the way that they are."
But it's something, Sean, that nobody got the opportunity to vote for. It's something that many people would go as far as to suggest that he lied to us about, because if they knew they were going to do it, which they must have done because they've done it so quickly in office, we should have been given the opportunity to vote for it. It's something that affects around 10 million people. That's roughly speaking 1 in 7 people in the UK. That is the kind of thing that surely there should be a vote on.
We just had an election in which there was very clearly a vote, in which the absolute central proposition of the Labour Party was we're going to have to take some very difficult choices. The country's in an absolute economic
No, it
mess.
wasn't. That's what Keir Starmer stood up and said in his recent speech to the country. It was all about change. It was all about, positive, get rid of the Tories, everything will be fantastic.
Before the election. I'm afraid you weren't listening during the election, if that's what you think.
No, I think I was.
It was very clear during the election. It was very clear before the election.
So you think the tone hasn't changed? The tone from Keir Starmer has not changed at all. He was just as negative. He was telling the country that things are going to get worse before they get better if he's elected. Was that really what he was telling the country?
It was, if you go back and read the speeches of Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer before, not just during, but before and during the election, you will see that it's absolutely consistently what they've been saying for at least 6 to 9 months. It's completely consistent. They always said that.
I mean, you had Lucy Powell. You had Lucy Powell today saying, saying that if they hadn't got rid of the winter fuel allowance, then the economy would essentially crash as a result of this, at the same time as dishing out, huge pay offers to the public sector. It doesn't make sense.
It makes perfect sense. I think what she was saying was, if we hadn't started the process of making the difficult choices that need to be making, of finding some of the savings that need to be made, and of finding the money to invest in the economy, which is where we get the growth, that is what is used to pay all the benefits for everybody, then
it's remarkable, Sean. I mean, if nothing has changed, and they were saying this all along, then there will be no need for them to be now blaming everything on this black hole that they've found, and presumably the polls wouldn't be tanking and his approval ratings wouldn't be tanking, because everyone would be thinking, well, he's actually just doing everything he told us about, wouldn't he? And I don't remember him saying anything about banning smoking in wide open parks or outside nightclubs.
I think what you've just encapsulated there is the thing that has changed is that it is even worse than they realised, and if the tone has changed, it's even more gloomy than it was. But it was very pragmatic and worried before and during the election, and even more so now that they've seen the books.
Well,
OK.
So are we. Sean, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
That's former Labour MP Sean Simon there. Take care.
All right. We'll have to do a little montage of what they said before the election and what they're saying now. Certainly got a bit more miserable, hasn't it? Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Now, coming up, we're going to be talking about what's happening in Germany, because the right-wing anti-immigration party over there has stormed to victory in a key state election. This is very interesting indeed. What could it mean for Germany and Europe?
Yeah, no, indeed. It's a massive story, so we'll bring that to you very shortly.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The court on Wednesday ruled that a teenager was wrongly ignored before being forced into end-of-life care. Sudiksha Thirumalesh, who was 19, died last year after being prevented from travelling abroad for treatment after doctors said her condition was incurable. Doctors said Ms. Thirumalesh's objection to their decision was unreasonable and that she should have all life-sustaining treatment ended and be put on a palliative care pathway. Last August, a ruling said that the teenager lacked mental capacity to make her own decisions, but 3 judges in the Court of Appeal overturned that decision last week. Lawyers said the move reaffirms the right of patients to disagree with their doctors. The teenager remained fully conscious while being treated by the University Hospitals Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust. Well, to discuss this tragic case, Sudik Shah's father, Thirumalesh, and brother Varshan join me now. Thank you so much for joining me in these desperately sad circumstances. This is very important for other people who may find themselves in a similar position, that they will be able to make decisions about their own care with the support of their families, rather than the sometimes arrogance of the medical profession who think that they know best. So you must be, I hope, very reassured by this judgment that Sudik Shah has achieved something for other people.
Yes, definitely, because this arrogance transformed into cruelty towards my sister's care and ill treatment of the whole family. They think they are on the top of the hierarchical spectrum, and they treated us like we were on the bottom of the lower end of the chains, or rather as low class, but we ensured that our class remained.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 1:25 and you're watching Good Afternoon Britain. Now, German politics has seen a shock result, though I'm not entirely sure it's a huge shock for everybody, at the weekend as the right-wing Alternative for Germany won in the eastern state of Thuringia.
Very good. Now the AfD won almost a third of the vote, putting them 9 points ahead of the Conservative CDU and far in front of Germany's three governing parties. Now, this is a result which will be a massive blow for the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who's labelled it as bitter. However, it has little hope of forming a government in Thuringia because all the other parties are unlikely to want to work with the AfD. So it's very interesting indeed what's happening over in Germany.
OK, so we are now joined by Editor-in-Chief News, Julian Reichelt, who is going to discuss how this will affect Europe. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. Now, just last week, I think it was actually, our Prime Minister was meeting your Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, and he was talking about progressives of Europe unite. And then, you know, here we go, the AfD secure a massive win. Are progressives on the way out in Germany, do you think?
Oh, they certainly are. I mean, I was on your show a few days ago discussing this meeting between Chancellor Olaf Scholz and your Prime Minister, and that they were talking about a big agreement they wanted to sign together. And what I told you is, you know, Olaf Scholz will be on his way out a few days from now. And that was delivered to him yesterday. Major blow for the administration here in Germany. So the right-wing AfD in Thuringia, just to put this into perspective, collected twice as many votes as the three parties that make up the whole administration, the coalition here in Germany. They were completely blown away. Two of them actually were dropped out of parliament because they didn't cross a 5% threshold. So they're not even in parliament anymore. So that is a major change. It's a major change to Olaf Scholz's government. It's a major blow to him. It's a major blow to his progressive and pro-migration policies, because that's what it was all about. This election was not so much about the AfD or the character standing for the AfD. It was about one topic only, and that is illegal migration.
And that is the AfD's policy platform, is it not? So what are they putting forward to the German people? Is it just immigration?
Well, they certainly are. I mean, I was on your show a few days ago discussing this meeting between Chancellor Olaf Scholz and your Prime Minister, and what I told you is, you know, Olaf Scholz will be on his way out a few days from now. And the That's pretty much everything. I mean, there are components that come with it. It's housing, you know, it's the social system, everything. It's crime, everything that is affected by migration. But their main talking point is illegal migration. Just to remind your viewers, it's been 300,000 people coming into Germany illegally, mainly from Islamist countries. Another 300,000 will be coming this year. And it has become a huge topic with, you know, crime shooting up, terrorist attacks just a few days ago, 3 people being murdered by an illegal immigrant from Syria. So that's what the AfD is all about. But that is also what the CDU is about, the, you know, Conservative Party. The thing with this AfD victory is this: depending on where you stand politically, the good news is nothing will happen because they will not govern. All the other parties will build a coalition around them. The bad news is nothing will happen. You know, the thing about illegal immigration will not change because the Conservatives have solemnly promised not to work with the AfD. That, however, would be the only majority for what most people by now desperately want: less migration, a protected border. They will not work together. So the CDU, the Conservatives, are now looking for another coalition on the very left. You know, they are now working with the heirs to the former East German State Party, the former communists. Suddenly the Conservatives are turning towards the communists just to prevent the AfD getting into power, and basically the people from getting what they want.
The people, you summed it up. It's, you know, there's a vote on this stuff, and politicians can't just keep ignoring it.
Yeah, I mean, the way this has been framed in the British press is that this is the first time a far-right party in Germany has won a key election since the Nazi era. That's how it's in the press. Those are the headlines that this is making. Is that a fair assessment of what we're seeing here? Is it a Nazi-era style party?
Well, I would always, you know, I love the British tabloid press. I love the British press, and I understand that they will never miss an opportunity on making a Nazi story out of something. And I get that, and I understand it. I'm a tabloid journalist, but this party is a you know, in some parts ugly, right-wing, anti-illegal immigration party. It has nothing to do with the German past. You know, making that comparison is obscene towards what has happened. It's pure relativism towards the German past. And obviously it is being framed like that to prevent people from getting what they desperately want. And not only AfD voters. You have majorities of 70, 80% who desperately ask the German government, regional, local governments to stop the flow of illegal immigration to Germany because it's coming from Islamist country. It's male only, all the things we've been discussing for years. And it's violent. It is violent. It is too violent. But you know, obviously this immigration is going against a kind of a dogma of the political left that, you know, migration is something good in itself. So they will try everything to prevent people from getting what they want. And that, of course, you know, is their most favorite tactic, making these, you know, Nazi comparisons, calling them Nazis. It is not a Nazi thing to stop illegal immigration. And it's not an AfD thing only. It has become, you know, the main demand of a vast, literally the largest majority I have ever seen, and I've covered politics for a while, in Germany for something. We're, you know, around 70 to 80% protect those borders.
Well, this is it. You know, this is the thing.
You know, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. The more people vote to the right, the more left is the government that you will get. And I think, you know, what I'm talking about. And that is becoming a problem because people are not voting for parties. They are voting for top. They're voting for top they want.
Yeah, the disconnect. Julian, thank you very much. I hope to talk to you again very soon. I'm sorry, we're just out of time now, but thank you. That's Julian Reichelt there. And he's got a point. Like, I don't claim to know the deep-seated intricacies of the AfD. Maybe there are a few fruity characters in there and all of that kind of stuff, but the general tone right across Europe and certainly here in Britain, as we're all well aware of, is this notion, isn't it, that if you are essentially in any way looking to clamp down on illegal immigration, or dare I say it, legal immigration as well, that, you know, there's the whiff of you being labelled far-right or a Nazi or something, isn't there? So it doesn't really seem to be much of a surprise that that's happening on the continent as well.
Yeah, I mean, Olaf Scholz himself has had to speak tough on immigration in recent days. Anyway, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to be talking about school absence fines. Should you be fined just for taking your kid out of school? You know, it's a holiday. It's a holiday. And Labour apparently want to ban takeaways near schools. Not sure how that will work.
Is there anything they don't want to ban? Should we just ban it all? I think it was Glynis who I had on my show on Friday night who said we'll be paying for oxygen soon. Anyway.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Leadership contender James Cleverly's launched his Tory leadership bid today, vowing to bring back the Rwanda plan, as he also said Conservative answers are needed to solve the most challenging problems facing our country. Cleverly highlighted the need for us to remake the argument for capitalism to boost economic growth and give younger people a stake in society. He also said he'd increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. And on illegal migration, Mr Cleverly says we need to have a deterrent.
I will use my contacts and my reputation with Rwanda to resurrect that incredibly important partnership. And more than that, I will rebuild a relationship so badly damaged by Labour's arrogant and callous disregard to the diplomatic niceties that bind the world. To inform the media that they were scrapping this partnership before they had the courage to inform the Rwandan government is unacceptable.
Kemi Badenoch also launched her Tory leadership campaign today, calling for change in the Conservative Party. The Shadow Communities Secretary and contender to replace Rishi Sunak says her party has to focus on renewal to be ready to return to power. Ms Badenoch used the speech to also accuse Labour of pulling the wool over the eyes of the public, insisting that it's time for something new. The Prime Minister has said the scrapping of single-phrase inspection headline grades for schools in England will be a relief for parents. Previously, Ofsted awarded 1 of 4 headline grades to schools it inspects, and those are outstanding, good, requires improvement and inadequate. The Department for Education says for inspections this academic year, though, parents will see 4 grades across the existing subcategories, those being quality of education, behaviour and attitudes, personal development and leadership and management. The Prime Minister says it'll hold schools accountable. And the wife of a Conservative councillor has pleaded guilty to publishing written material to stir up racial hatred. 41-year-old childminder Lucy Connolly called for mass deportations and attacks on hotels housing asylum seekers in a post on X on the day that 3 little girls were killed in Southport. The post has now been deleted from her X account, and she later apologised for acting on false and malicious information. Lucy is the wife of Conservative councillor Raymond Connolly. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update here on GB News from the Met Office. Big thunderstorms likely in places this afternoon. By no means everywhere catching a downpour, but where they are forming, dropping a lot of rain in a short space of time. It's a bit of a messy picture with low pressure sitting across the country, but also a whole tangle of weather fronts all drifting up from the south. That's why it's still quite warm and humid. We are seeing some big downpours developing this afternoon, particularly over parts of mid and East Wales into the West Midlands and especially northeast Scotland. Much of eastern England staying dry. It may well brighten up here and still quite a warm and humid feel, 24, maybe 25 in 1 or 2 places. It's cooler where we've got the clouds and the outbreaks of rain, particularly persistent over western Scotland. But it's really in the northeast of Scotland where we're looking at some pretty nasty thunderstorms breaking out and spreading slowly northwards. A lot of spray, surface water on the roads here, the potential for some flooding as well. The rain maybe not as heavy further west, but it is still a pretty damp day across western Scotland and the east of Northern Ireland. Then another zone where we could catch some big thunderstorms, parts of Wales and the West Midlands especially. So again, that could cause some disruption. The thunderstorm warning remains in place until midnight. We'll see them drifting further north, perhaps into parts of northern England during the evening time as well. But generally, it does turn a bit drier as we go through the night, certainly in western Scotland and the east of Northern Ireland. Some showers perhaps coming into the southeast. Still pretty warm, pretty humid across across these eastern areas, but further west starting to turn a little fresher overnight, some places down into single figures. And for many, there'll be a cooler, fresher feel on Tuesday. Still a lot of cloud over the Midlands, and there will still be some heavy showers potentially, most likely over East Anglia and the southeast, but generally a sunnier day for northern England, Wales and southwest England. A few showers coming into the northwest, and as I said, starting to turn a little bit fresher and cooler by the afternoon.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M80 northbound in Falkirk. There's a lane closed for a 3-vehicle accident between junction 8, the M8, 7, 6 and 9 for Bannockburn. Slow for the M8 westbound in Glasgow between junction 13, Provan and 15 for Townhead. Queues on the M1 southbound in South Yorkshire. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 31, Worksop and 30 for Sheffield South. Slow for the M6 northbound in the West Midlands. 2 lanes blocked for an accident just before junction 6, Spaghetti Junction. Severe delays on the M5 southbound in Gloucestershire due to an earlier accident between junction 17, Cribbs Causeway and 18 for the M49, and possibly as a result we're seeing very slow traffic on the M4 westbound towards junction 22, the M49, possibly as traffic diverts from the M5. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:39, and a nice smile in there, yeah, grinning away. Anyway, Labour's battle against bad health is going up a level as they plan to ban takeaways from being opened up near schools.
This proposal follows on from the idea to ban outdoor smoking, as Labour seem to be committed to, well, they would say improving the health of all ages, and many other people would just say desperately trying to asphyxiate the life out of us. But is this a good move, or is it just more of Keir Starmer trying to control us and control us? Who have we got on this then?
We have got the wonderful former presenter of Fat Families and political commentator Steve Miller. Steve, thank you very much indeed. Now, I think, my producer told me, that you're in favour of this. You think that it's a good thing to ban these outlets from outside schools.
I don't just think it's a good thing, I think it's a blooming damn excellent thing. And I'll tell you why, because for kids with child obesity, we have a problem. Nearly a quarter of children aged 10 or 11 are now obese. And we've nearly got 1 in 10 in reception school that are obese as well. This is really concerning. And the one thing that's very important for children is to set an example, and to set an example of health. Now, that does include making sure that they don't get this access to takeaways. We've got to remember, food is hypnotic. You see it, you smell it, and it becomes very attractive. The other thing I would say, though, I balance that with parent power. We do have many parents that are irresponsible. We have many parents that can't be bothered. And, to manage obesity, you do have to look at the environment. So what I think the government's not saying is they're not going to ban all takeaways. What they are saying is they're going to limit the amount of openings of takeaways. That, to me, to be fair, and I'm no Keir Starmer fan, but what I would say is that is common sense, good common sense. Can I also say that something else, though, because there's a couple of other points, one of the key points is that role modelling in the classroom is important. So it might not be very popular to say it, but less fat teachers.
Yes.
Less fat teachers as well.
100%, 100%. And also, I'm very sorry about all of this, but Keir Starmer's not the picture of health. And I'll keep saying that until I'm blue in the face. It will be like, I'm sorry, it will be like Boris Johnson saying he's going to ban cheese and wine, OK? If I'm going to have a bloke there standing in front of me, desperately trying to tell me that he wants to take the burden off the NHS, despite being able to afford private healthcare himself and refusing to do it, being able to afford private healthcare for his loved ones and refusing to let them do it, and I will say this now, Keir Starmer is overweight. Keir Starmer is overweight.
He's not.
Yes,
I won't
he is.
have that.
You can ask Peter Mandelson about that. Told him to lose a few pounds before the last election, didn't he?
Well, they always say that,
Now, I'm
don't
not
they?
trying to fat shame him, but what I am saying is, get out of my life, Sir Keir. Look, I don't know. Do you think it will have any difference? Will it end up just, creating some kind of junior black market for fat food, Steve? What do you reckon?
Deliveroo.
Well, the first thing to say is Keir Starmer's birthday today, and do I think he'll be putting his face into Victoria's sponge? Probably. I think he probably will. And yes, I mean, I've never seen him in the flesh, but he does look like he could lose a little bit. He looks a bit podgy. Listen,
I'm not having this fat shaming, guys.
It's all about messaging, and to children, these are the precious people we need to look after. And all he's saying is common sense says don't put it in front of them and tease them with it. Perhaps replace these takeaways with something more appropriate so that health can be promoted rather than junk food promoted. So it's not about complete ban. It's about saying we've got to re-educate. How do you re-educate? You do it by making sure that what's visual is healthy. And this is one very small way of doing it. But parent power is by far the most important.
Yep. Steve Miller, thank you, as ever.
Cheers, Steve.
Former presenter of Fat Families. Always great to speak to you on this one. I mean, it would be nicer if there were less fast food outlets on the high street, but that's just because they tend to be quite ugly. No offence if you run one.
I'm just worried about the creep of this. Then it goes, oh, well, your corn shop can't sell sweets and all that. So I don't like it. Just teach your kids not to go and eat a burger for lunch, right? That's what you got to do.
Get your views in on that one, but we're going to move on very quickly because today is the start of a new academic year. And for parents, it marks the day that fines for term time absences go up.
Yeah, the cost of penalty charges has increased to £80 if paid within 21 days, £160 if paid within 28 days, bearing in mind that I got fined £65 for daring to park my car in the wrong zone for less than 10 minutes the other day.
Paid that yet?
That seems quite reasonable in a sense. Anyway, it comes as Ofsted grades are due to be more transparent as well, so there's lots of school stuff going on at the moment.
Yes, the government have announced they're scrapping 1- or 2-word Ofsted inspection grades for England schools immediately. That's the outstanding, could do better, whatever they are. Well, joining us now to discuss this is educationalist, school governor and author of Lessons from Lockdown, Dr. Tony Breslin. Let's start with those Ofsted one-word descriptions of our schools. Apparently, some parents quite like them.
Well, there is an argument that they offer simplicity, but they oversimplify. This is a good move. It gives parents more information while putting less stress on schools to achieve a single judgment. So actually parents will look at the 4 areas or just the 4 terms if they wish, but they'll see personal development, they'll see leadership and management, of course they'll see quality of education, and of course they'll see behaviour. And different parents may put a different emphasis on some of those things when they're choosing schools. So actually what we've done is said, let's have more nuance. This is what the profession, I've certainly been writing about this for some time. Let's bring more nuance to the inspection process, or the reporting process, I should say. This will give more and better information to parents. It will place less stress on teachers.
Just to say, as it currently stands, if you want to, you see a school that's got the word outstanding on a banner outside it, can you then go on a website, the Ofsted website, and look at that in more detail?
Yes, you can look at the Ofsted report for any school, for every school, is on the Ofsted website.
So, this is what I don't quite... Sorry to interrupt, but this is what I don't quite understand. Because it all already exists, doesn't it? You can just go and do that if you want. And what would stop a school who's been rated clearly outstanding just putting outstanding outside?
There's no substantial change in the framework.
Right.
But a lot of people don't get beyond the banner on the fence. And sometimes it's been a really close call as to whether that banner says good or says outstanding. That's what puts the stress there. So actually now, what schools are going to have to say, if they want to put it on the fence... Now, my wife took a school to outstanding, kept it outstanding, and deliberately never put a banner on the fence. A lot of great schools don't do that. Some choose to. That's fine. But what we're saying now is that you cannot sum up an organisation as complex as a modern school or any school with one word. What we are saying, maybe you can look at it across the 4 areas and say, how does it score in each? This is a good one. There are no losers out of this. I think it's a good call by the Education Secretary.
OK, well, you put the case very strongly. Thank you very much indeed. Outstanding. Dr. Tony Breslin, educationist, school governor and author of Lessons from Lockdown. I say if I were a head teacher and mine was deemed to be outstanding, I'd slap that everywhere.
Paint the school with it.
I'd paint the school with it. Outstanding. A bit of embarrassment if you have to wash it off when it doesn't do so well the next year. Anyway, coming up, does Harry want to return to the UK? Apparently so. Stay tuned.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Susie, let's start with you, and you will say that being a mum is the equivalent of a second full-time job.
Yeah, I mean, I think any mum would say that. But, you know, it's a massive privilege to be a mother. It's a massive privilege to, to have children. But it's an incredible amount of work. Most people would argue that you are, it's a privilege and you don't do it for this, but actually you are contributing to the economy because you're also producing the future people that are going to go into work.
If men were doing the lion's share of the childcare as well, everyone would know about it, but women don't shout about it. They put up and get on with it. But times are changing, aren't they, Reem? And I think, there's nobody here suggesting that women need special favours, but they need to have certain understanding within the workplace. There's arguments, isn't there, for pregnant then screwed, who's campaigning 100% for meritocracy, but they want to see things like flexible working so that women can work around childcare responsibilities, and they want to be able to make sure that women aren't squeezed out of the labour market because they simply can't juggle both things.
Absolutely. I mean, look, being a mother is one of the most incredible things that any woman can do. And I think it's wonderful that so many women are able to work and have children. I think it's wonderful. I think we should have the utmost respect for every single woman that is able to balance and juggle all of that. However, I think we need to be having these conversations about how best employers can cater towards different people's needs. We want to be encouraging parents to be working as well as having children and contributing to the economy. But it is incredibly unfair if we begin to give those particular people preferential treatment in the workplace. And I think that some of their childless colleagues will begin to resent them.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back. It's 10 to 2. Now, Prince Harry has consulted former aides about a possible partial return to the UK as he seeks to repair his public image. That's according to the Daily Mail.
Yes, the major move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In From the Cold, catchy, as he's allegedly growing dissatisfied with advice from American-based image experts.
I'm not surprised. They've absolutely mugged him off. Right, joining us to discuss this now is royal commentator Caroline Aston. Caroline, so does Harry really want to come back?
He may do, because there are lots of strands to this story. Let's look at it from the King's viewpoint for a start. Still undergoing cancer treatment. You know, he's 76 in November. He has loose ends in his life, which anybody faced with a diagnosis like his might just want to knit up. Tighten them up a little bit. And we know he's been consulting spiritual advisors about the nature of forgiveness. So that could be some motivation on that side. On the other, though, Harry. Now, why does he want to come back? He's offered, of course, to do a little light royal work, you know, zero publicity, of course, zero balcony appearances. How likely is that? There'd be a piranha fish fest going on the moment he set foot on our shores. And, of course, that sails perilously close to disobeying the late Queen's absolute diktat that he could not be half in and half out. And at the back of all this lies the undeniable fact that Bran Sussex, the great American dream, has somewhat lost its way. The proof of any pudding is in the eating, and there must be a very sad, sour taste in the mouths of both Sussexes at the moment. We've got Meghan making jam, cooking in a kitchen that isn't her own, and I think Harry's about to conjure up a picture of that niche sport, polo. The Netflix contract comes up for renewal next year. And don't forget, Spotify has already gone the way of all flesh, and indeed they've been called a couple of grifters by the powers that be there. This is a crucial time for the Sussexes, and it's interesting, isn't it, that these trusted aides and friends he's been consulting are so trusted, of course, they've leaked the whole idea to the press, because at the end of the day, publicity is oxygen to the Sussexes. And what better publicity could you have than this dangling, if you like, the carrot of reconciliation, knowing the press will zero in on this like an Exocet missile?
Well, you put that in such beautiful terms. What wonderful turns of phrase. Caroline, just very quickly, we haven't got long. Is it true, is it right what Patrick said, that the pair have been mugged off by the American PR guys?
Well, I would say if you're an advisor, your job's to give advice. That's what it says on the tin. But you can only give advice if someone's listening to it. And you must get very frustrated if you find your real job is to rubber stamp decisions that the great and the good have already made. Camp Montecito, heads above the parapet. What will happen next? Watch this space.
Watch this space. Caroline, thank you very much. You always deliver. Caroline Aston there, the fabulous royal commentator. Well,
it's always poetry, wasn't it?
Oh, I could have listened to that for hours.
Could have listened to it. Find out what happens next.
Loads more coming your way. We're going to be debating whether or not parents should be fined for taking their kids outside of school during term time. We're going to be talking about that and a heck of a lot more as well, including as well some of the new Conservative immigration policies by their respective leaders. So there's going to be quite a lot for us to get our teeth stuck into there, so we'll see you in a second.
Yeah, stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Plenty going on in the skies today. Some big thunderstorms in places, but other areas just fine with some warm and humid sunshine. It's a bit of a messy weather picture. Low pressure system sitting over the UK. Old weather fronts generating some hefty downpours. We've seen some thunderstorms and a few more to come through the evening time, potentially causing some disruption. Parts of the Welsh Marches up into the West Midlands, North West England, but also North East Scotland, all tending to ease as we go through the night, but still a few showers coming into parts of the Midlands during the early hours. Still quite warm and humid over eastern England, but generally turning cooler and fresher, particularly in parts of Scotland, well down into single figures here. And that fresher air will spread in more widely as we go through tomorrow, but still probably quite warm, quite humid first thing in the morning over the Midlands, southern England. Still a lot of cloud and still some showers here, but brighter skies further north over northern England and much of Scotland. But for Northern Ireland and western Scotland, there's another zone of rain coming in. It won't be as heavy as the thunderstorms that we've seen today, but nevertheless a dull, damp start in the northwest. A lot of clouds still over the Midlands and eastern England early on. Still a few showers here. Still got the humid air in place for tomorrow. Potential for one or two heavy ones, particularly across the far southeast, Kent into parts of Norfolk and Suffolk during the early afternoon. Possibility of the odd thunderstorm. But for much of Wales, northern England, southwest England, it's a much brighter day and a fresher feel as well, with temperatures for many in the high teens. Wednesday's a fresher feel even in the south and east, and again a mix of sunshine and showers, but for many, I think, across southern Scotland, northern England, it will be a fine day. We'll see quite a few showers for Northern Ireland, Wales, and developing again over central and eastern parts of England. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 2 o'clock on Monday, the 2nd of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Patrick Christie.
Now, the race for the next Tory leader kicks into gear today. Kemi Badenoch was the first to go, but she did refuse to say what level of immigration she'd like to see.
Next up was the Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly. He vowed to bring back the Rwanda plan, actually, and said that he was uniquely suited to unite his party and win the next general election.
And dodging a vote, Labour are accused of hiding from scrutiny as MPs demand a vote on the scrapping of the winter fuel allowance, which would impact millions of pensioners.
We've got a couple of other stories as well. So there is a trans runner in the Paralympics who is a 50-year-old born male who is now competing against women. Apparently, he is now qualified for the semi-final. So you were going to be talking about that, whether or not that's okay.
Apparently competing as a male up to 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So a very recent change. So we're getting stuck into that. And also whether parents should be fined for taking their children out of school during the holiday time. Now, we're mentioning this because the fine has increased. It's like a car park ticket. A parking ticket, isn't it?
Well, I want to know
if you pay it within an amount of time, then it's less than if you leave it for a while.
I want to know whether or not the fine outweighs the saving. Because that's the point, isn't it? There's no point fining me £100 if I've saved £1,000.
But what about the priceless cost of educating your child?
Oh, yeah, great. So Sandra from the geography department can tell your kid they might have been born into the wrong body and, you know, all
OK,
that.
school is a good thing.
OK.
School is a good
right,
thing.
Fine.
gbnews.com/your say. I know Martin Daubney's taking his kid out. He mentioned it on air, so...
I was going to say, otherwise you've just driven a massive bus.
I'm not dobbing him in, I'm not dobbing him in. Maybe you at home have a few times, who knows. It's cheaper, it's cheaper. Anyway, let's get the headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. Leadership contender James Cleverly's launched his Tory bid this afternoon, vowing to bring back the Rwanda plan, as he also said Conservative answers are needed to solve the most challenging problems facing our country. Cleverly highlighted the need for us to remake the argument for capitalism to boost economic growth and give younger people a stake in society. He also said he'd increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. And on illegal migration, Mr Cleverly says we need to have a deterrent.
I will use my contacts and my reputation with Rwanda to resurrect that incredibly important partnership. And more than that, I will rebuild a relationship so badly damaged by Labour's arrogant and callous disregard to the diplomatic niceties that bind the world. To inform the media that they were scrapping this partnership before they had the courage to inform the Rwandan government is unacceptable.
Kemi Badenoch's also launched her Tory leadership campaign today, calling for change in contender to replace Rishi Sunak, says her party has to focus on renewal to be ready to return to power. Ms Badenoch used the speech to also accuse Labour of pulling the wool over the eyes of the public, insisting that it's time for something new.
Not just sit around pointing out how terrible Labour are. That's just not good enough. And we can't just keep having the same policy arguments from the last Parliament. We are not in power, we lost. Labour will fail. And when that time comes and the British people are looking for change, we have to be that change. We have to focus on renewal, the renewal of our party, our politics and our thinking. And it starts with principles. Principles are the fundamentals that give us direction, unity and certainty. They must underpin everything we do.
The Prime Minister says the scrapping of single-phrase inspection headline grades for schools in England will be a relief for parents. Previously, Ofsted awarded 1 of 4 headline grades to schools it inspects, and those are outstanding, good, requires improvement and inadequate. The Department for Education says for inspections this academic year, though, parents will see 4 grades across the existing subcategories, those being quality of education, behaviour and attitudes, personal development and leadership and management. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has told reporters today that the death of head teacher Ruth Perry made the need for Ofsted reform absolutely clear. The Prime Minister says it'll hold schools accountable.
I've got a mission for our government, which is to make sure that every single child, whatever their background, wherever they come from, has the best possible education. And this move today is about driving up standards, making sure that we've got a richer picture so parents can see in a more accountable way the real strength of a school and making sure we've got the improvements in to catch schools quickly. So this is all about driving up standards, and I'm really pleased that we're able to do it so quickly.
In other news, the wife of a Conservative councillor has pleaded guilty to publishing written material to stir up racial hatred. 41-year-old childminder Lucy Connolly called for mass deportations and attacks on hotels housing asylum seekers in a post on X on the day that 3 little girls were killed in Southport. The post has now been deleted from her X account, and she later apologised for acting on false and malicious information. Lucy is the wife of Conservative councillor Raymond Connolly. An Israeli court has ruled that a general strike that shut much of the country's economy must end this afternoon. Israel's entire economy is on strike today in a bid to pressure the country's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, into accepting a Gaza ceasefire deal after 6 hostages were shot dead in Gaza. IDF soldiers recovered the bodies of the hostages, who Israel says were killed moments before troops reached them. Back home, the Department for Work and Pensions is launching a week of action to encourage the elderly to check their eligibility for pension credit, worth up to £3,900 a year. The campaign will involve charities and local authorities, urging that families, friends and neighbours of elderly people to ask them to look into whether they could benefit. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is seeking to soften the blow from her cut on winter fuel allowance, with a drive to encourage more pensioners to take up benefits that they may not know that they're entitled to. The Prime Minister has said today that he doesn't want to cut winter fuel allowance, but called it a tough decision made to stabilise the economy. And the government has promised to look into dynamic ticket pricing after the cost of tickets for the Oasis reunion tour more than doubled while on sale. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy described the selling of inflated Oasis tickets as depressing. On Saturday, fans of the world-famous band sat in virtual queues for hours, hoping to get their hands on tickets to one of the shows next year. However, when they finally got through, many were met with ticket prices far higher than face value. Some expressed their anger on social media as tickets worth £148 were being sold for £355 on Ticketmaster within hours of release. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, welcome back. It is now 2:08. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily Carver, and today, Patrick Christie's. You're also here tomorrow.
I am here
also
tomorrow.
here tomorrow. Now, it's been a big day for the Conservatives, but are people listening? We've had Kemi Badenoch. She gave her speech this morning. Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, asked her what level of immigration she'd like, whether there'll be a target. Kemi wouldn't give one. She said it's not about a target because they failed in the past. We also heard from the former Home Secretary, didn't we, James Cleverly. He made his pitch to the nation, talking about the good work he did in the Home Office, bringing immigration down. He spoke about bringing back the Rwanda deportation plan. That would be rather controversial, wouldn't it? He also talked about abolishing stamp duty altogether. So it was an interesting morning.
Yeah, exactly. So the Tories are, going back and forth at the moment as they desperately try to win your votes. But looking at the Labour side of things, well, Keir Starmer is now absolutely slumped in the polls to a lead of just 4%. It's quite remarkable, really, isn't it? Considering we're only a couple of months on from that whopping great big landslide. He's also now defending his party's choice to cut winter fuel payments for 10 million pensioners. He's not going to, as it stands, put that to a vote in Parliament, despite massive pressure too. People are saying, well, it wasn't in the manifesto, it's going to affect roughly 1 in 7 people in Britain, which, it's the kind of thing that might be worth a vote, really. But he says it's the right thing to do to help get the country's finances back on track.
I don't want to cut the winter fuel allowance. I don't think anybody government wants to do that. But we've got to fix the foundations of our economy. And that's what this is all about, making sure that we fix the foundations. And then, having done that we can build a better future that pensioners and so many other people voted for in this election. So this is a tough decision. Not a decision I want to make, but I'm absolutely determined we'll stabilise the economy and fix the foundations. And then on that, we will build the better Britain that we were elected into government with a strong mandate to bring about.
OK, that's Keir Starmer answering that question on the winter fuel allowance.
Just very quickly say something, which is, I think it's worth noting that Keir Starmer actually has been accused of hypocrisy by Conservatives over his tax-exempt pension deal from his previous job. Yeah, so when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, reportedly he has a tax-free pension, so it's interesting to think what he's doing with pensioners, but himself. Anyway.
Yeah, well, let's speak to the political editor at HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin, this should have been in the manifesto, and seeing as it wasn't, there should be a vote, surely?
Yeah, I don't see any harm in it, but I'm not a Labour MP or the Prime Minister, so I can see the jeopardy for Labour and not wanting to have a vote. Obviously, they've got a massive majority, so they wouldn't lose the vote, but it would expose Labour splits on it. I think quite a few Labour MPs would at least be tempted to vote against the government. Now, we had that with the two-child benefit cap, if you remember, a vote on the King's speech just after the election, and 7 Labour MPs voted against the government and lost the Labour whip, been suspended for 6 months. So maybe Labour think, well, if we have another vote, we risk another rebellion. Do we have to lay down the law? But I don't think it will stop the Conservatives and indeed the Liberal Democrats as well from pursuing this. And there are always other parliamentary mechanisms by which you can vote, force a vote. So I wouldn't rule it out at the moment. But yeah, I can understand why Labour are not exactly keen to have a vote, because, as I say, it would definitely expose some splits among their MPs.
Yeah, I mean, is there an element of hypocrisy here with Keir Starmer? I mean, his own pension's basically gold-plated, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I remember the Conservatives were making that point, I think, before the election as well. He's got a very unique pension arrangement because of his time as the Director of Public Prosecutions. In fact, ironically, it was the Conservative government who brought in that particular legislation which put his pension on the statute books. But, you know, there's another way that he can be accused of hypocrisy. Before the election, he stood up at the dispatch box when he was still the leader of the opposition and challenged the Conservatives to say that they would not reduce winter fuel payments, and that was only in May. So here we are 3 months later, and that's exactly what Labour have done when in government. So yeah, there's no doubt this is uncomfortable for them. Lucy Powell was out yesterday making pretty remarkable claims that it was all about trying to prevent a run on the pound and the economy crashing, which, you know, did seem a little bit over the top. But yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it just shows that when you're in government, things are a lot more difficult than when you're in opposition.
And more generally, generally, do you think the government is focusing on the right things? We're hearing quite a lot about sort of public health measures, aka often known as nanny state measures. We've got talk of banning smoking outside, so outside nightclubs, pubs and whatever else.
Tighter restrictions on online as well?
Yeah, tighter restrictions online in terms of speech, social media regulations. You've got disposable vapes, they might be banned. You've got takeaways outside schools, can't have any more of those.
Nationalised ticket systems, ticket sales?
Nationalising ticket sales, potentially, with this Oasis controversy over people not getting them for the price that was advertised to begin with. I mean, Kevin, they really are micromanaging to the extreme, aren't they?
I'd be very surprised if they nationalised ticket sales. That was a suggestion made by Zara Sultana, who's very much on the left of the Labour Party, I think, expressing her frustration that she couldn't get Oasis tickets. Lucy Powell was actually asked about that yesterday and said they wouldn't be doing it.
Hang on, we're hearing about
so that's one thing I think we can definitely rule out.
A probe into dynamic pricing. I mean, surely a ticket is worth as much as someone's going to pay for it, surely?
Yeah, but although I think a lot of people were very unhappy at the way the system operated on Saturday, I have to declare a bit of an interest here. I was in the queue as well for an Oasis ticket.
It's not a public service, Kevin.
Gave up in the
it's
end,
not a public service.
I gave up in the end. I gave up in the end, but you know, I think consumers need protected. You know, and if at the beginning of the day a ticket is worth 150 quid, and by the end of the day it's worth more than twice that, I think that's
but
a reasonable
it is worth more than twice that, though, isn't it? Because demand dictates that it is.
Well, it's the same ticket. It's the same as the thing. They're not getting a different service from it. It's the same ticket for the same event. So I think it's worthy of an explanation, at least, from Ticketmaster. But yeah, I don't think Labour would be well advised to take too much time getting into the weeds over this one. On the smoking ban, there's been a real backlash on that. I wonder whether this was a kite flown last week to try and judge what the public mood would be. I'd be surprised at this stage whether that actually made it into the legislation, given how much of a backlash there has been. I think we'll have to take a close look at that legislation when it's eventually brought forward.
I think that's going to be very telling, Kevin, isn't it, about the actual psychology of not just Keir Starmer but his advisers as well. Given that backlash, do they plough ahead with it? I think we'll learn quite a lot about this government going forward.
Yeah, some people saying it's a dead cat strategy. You know, distract with smoking, which will get all the headlines and people will debate ad nauseum, you know, and it distracts from bigger issues. Kevin Schofield, thank you as ever, political editor at the HuffPost UK. I mean, it's crazy. You can't have a government getting into the nitty-gritty of ticket sales, surely. Surely. It's not like a loaf of bread where, you know, there's an abundance. There is a fixed number of tickets.
Well, there's also the risk. There's also the massive risk, isn't there, that if Keir Starmer wants to try to get involved into absolutely every little thing, then that means that every little thing becomes his fault.
Yes, that's
as well.
true.
And so does he really want to behave like that? I don't know. I think we're still trying to assess the psychology of our new dear leader, aren't we? But German politics has seen an interesting result over the weekend as the right-wing Alternative for Germany won in the eastern state of Thuringia.
Yes, the AfD won almost a third of the vote, putting them 9 points ahead of the Conservative CDU and far in front of Germany's three governing parties. It is a result that is quite the blow for German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who labelled it as bitter. I wonder if that's the direct translation there. However, it has little hope of forming a government in Thuringia because other parties are unlikely to work with the AfD.
Classic, isn't it, this? Well, look, I'm joined now by senior researcher at Legatum Institute, Guy Dampier. Guy, great to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. So, what does this mean for Germany? What does this mean for Europe? It comes off the back of Keir Starmer going over there and pressing the flesh of his old mate Olaf and saying that, you know, we need progressives of Europe unite. Well, it turns out maybe the Germans have even less respect for him than we do.
It does, but it seems that the German government, or the coalition government, is even less popular than Keir Starmer is at the moment. They have done appallingly. In fact, the AfD in these two state elections got more votes than the three parties in the coalition government put together. So it's a pretty resounding repudiation of the current government. That won't necessarily change things for now because the German system is quite inflexible. Things will go on until the federal elections, which are early next year. But in the meantime, there's an increasing awareness that this government is something of a lame duck. And the real question now is becoming who is going to replace it.
And what's your assessment of why the AfD is garnering all of these votes, and particularly in East Germany? Is it simply down to immigration?
I think it's the only thing you can put it down to. And what you can look at is you can look at the other party that did extremely well, which is the BSW, the BSV. They are a left-wing populist party, and they're left on economics, and they're left-wing on foreign policy, but they're more right-wing on migration. And they also did staggeringly well. They launched just recently, and they went straight into double-digit votes. So that shows that whether on the left or on the right, there is a massive, massive appetite among the German public for restrictions on immigration. And that's a completely reasonable thing, because the German government has put immigration on steroids, and the country simply cannot deal with the load it's being put under.
Yeah, indeed. And I just wonder whether or not we are at serious risk, if it's not already here, by the way, of this unbelievable level of disconnect between the people who are actually in positions of power and the people that they are supposed to serve. Whether it comes down to ignoring votes, which is what they will try and do with this by just shoving the AfD out because they'll refuse to work with them, whether it's the language that's used by Keir Starmer, not addressing legal or illegal immigration, calling it irregular migration, refusing to accept that people have legitimate concerns about it. Actually, if you did really seriously want to guard against the rise of the far right, ignoring people's concerns about immigration is probably the worst way to go about it, isn't it?
Definitely. You can make a very reasonable case that there are extreme elements to the AfD, but at the end of the day, the German people want a restriction on migration, and it is actually the governing class that's refusing to do it. And in that case, it's the government that's extremist. They are out of touch with the democratic will, and they are imposing something that Germans have never voted for and which the country cannot handle. I mean, we're talking about a €50 billion bill on dealing with migrants who come through the asylum system. That's about the same level as the defence budget. It's simply not feasible.
So they're spending the same amount on defence as they are now on asylum?
On asylum, yes. I mean, a lot of that is going to be welfare. So even in the last year that we have figures for, about 500,000 people came through the asylum system, not including Ukrainians. And most of those would have gone straight onto Germany's relatively generous welfare system, especially the new Bürgergeld. And that, again, the Germans basically can't.
You can see how people in poorer parts of East Germany would be particularly worried about this.
Even wealthy people paying loads.
But that's where they're gaining the more the votes. Guy Dampier, thank you very much, senior researcher at Legatum Institute. Thank you very much indeed. Gosh.
Remarkable. No, I'm sorry, but anyone will be well within their rights to not be OK with that.
It's interesting because even Olaf Scholz is talking tough since that recent terror attack at that festival in Solingen.
Nothing changed. We've seen that play out before, though, unfortunately. There's a small reaction, there's, candlelight vigils, and then everything just carries on the way it's always carried on. Yeah, it's deeply, deeply concerning times, but there we are. There we are.
Well, perhaps we should talk about something slightly more trivial, but important nonetheless. We're going to be debating whether parents should be fined for taking their kids out of school during term time. What do you think?
Well, look, I think if you can save yourself a shed load of money and your child misses, a week of school, I don't think it's going to massively harm them, although I'm not... Is it a law? Am I encouraging people to break the law? No, don't break the law.
Don't break the law.
Don't do that.
Send them to school. Next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Soya, almond, oats, hazelnut, coconut milk.
Yeah.
It's now much more difficult to choose.
Yeah, there's an awful lot out there on the market. So how do you feel about horse milk? Yes, you heard that right. For generations, people in Central Asia have sworn by horse milk and the supposed health benefits. And now researchers in Poland believe it should even be used in ice cream. For the sweet treat not only tastes delicious, apparently, but could also be good for your gut.
OK, well, joining us now to give us the lowdown on why we should be considering switching over to horse milk is farmer Frank Shellard from Cromwell Farm, Britain's only horse dairy. Good morning, Frank. Look, you're an expert on all things milk. You've even written a book on it. Is horse milk good for you? How does it compare nutritionally, first of all, to cow's milk?
I think the big difference is, just to make the point from the very start, cows, sheep and goats and all those other alternative milks have got 4 stomachs. Horse has got a single stomach, so a lot of the enzymes and a lot of the makeup of the milk is very similar to mother's milk. So our bodies are a lot more able, us being a single stomach animal, if you like, to digest that milk. So that's the big thing. That's the first point I'd like to make. Because of the makeup of the mare's milk, you could drink the lactose and the lactase in it. You could probably, not all, don't quote with everybody, but a big percentage of those people that are lactose intolerant could drink the mare's milk. The great thing about the mare's milk is it's very, very good for your gut flora. If you remember in the history books, Cleopatra bathed in ass's milk, and ass's milk is exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same makeup as mare's milk, and she bathed in it for eternal youth and to keep the skin and her metabolism correct.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, children across the UK have returned to school today. Also, MPs are returning to their school today, to Parliament. It's the start of a new academic year.
Well, to mark the start of a new term, fines have increased. Good news, yeah, fantastic. Fines have increased for parents who take their child out of school. The cost of the charge has increased to £80 if paid within 21 days, £160 if paid within 28 days.
Gosh, it's quite expensive, eh? So we're asking the question, should parents be fined at all for taking their child out of school?
Well, joined now by broadcaster Paula London, who believes parents should be fined, and also a parent, Julie Cook, who believes that they shouldn't. I am after a little bit more information on this. So, Julia, I'll start with you. I mean, why shouldn't parents be fined then, in your view? What's your case for saying that?
Well, if we'd been having this debate 2 years ago, I would have been on Paula's side. I would have been saying the same thing. But I think with the way holidays have gone up and the cynical increase in prices by holiday companies, the minute you're in the school holidays, it's making it impossible for even kind of well-to-do families to go on a decent holiday, particularly those who are poorer and save up all year. I just think it's a disgrace how they actually, the minute it goes to sort of July the 1st down to September, the prices shoot up to 3-4 times, and people just can't have a holiday anymore. As I say, 2 years ago, I'd been saying, no, that's it, you should be fined. I just think it's very, very hard for families to get any time away together, and our weather here is awful at the moment, isn't it? So I don't blame people for going away.
OK, well, Paula, your thoughts?
Yeah, I disagree. I think parents are teaching their children that education isn't a priority, and that can lead them to have very bad habits of attendance going forward if they choose to do higher education or if they get a job. And I don't believe they're 3 or 4 times more expensive holidays. They really aren't. Sometimes they're a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I remember when I was young, I went on 1 holiday a year. That was it, if I was lucky, somewhere nice and hot. Now parents want to go away 3 or 4 times a year. And I think a lot of these holidays are not even for the children, they're for the parents. And it's just wrong. It's not fair on the children. Schools aren't as good as they were in my day. In my day, we didn't have a woke curriculum. It was very important to spell correctly, very important to learn to add up and to read. Now children are leaving school without a good education. And, you know, you mentioned COVID, which was a great point. Since COVID, children have missed so much school, so they cannot afford to miss anymore.
OK.
Keep your children in school.
OK, Julie, I believe it's 80 quid a day if you pay within the first 21 days, which you obviously would, right? So I suppose the argument is whether or not you make that 80 quid a day back, isn't it?
Yeah, and that used to be the great toss-up, wasn't it? It was actually far cheaper to pay what used to be the £60 fine than pay an extra 800, 900 quid for your holiday. However, now that that's gone up, I can see, you know, why we're having this discussion. What's the best thing to do? I agree with what Paula said, that education is something important and we shouldn't be teaching our kids you just up and leave willy-nilly. I do think there ought to be some kind of, it should be based on attendance and how well you're doing. So if your child has attended pretty much well throughout the year, hasn't been off sick all the time, hasn't been off playing truant, has been a regular attendee at the school, then I don't see why a week off would harm them that much. Some children have more time off that for sporting extracurricular things or other things they do within the school. So I think it should depend also on how well that child attends the school.
I guess, Paula, for me, it's about thinking about, well, if everyone did it, if everyone took their kids out, it would be absolute chaos, wouldn't it? It'd be awful for the teachers, awful for the other children, awful for the other parents.
Exactly, great point. It's not fair on the teachers, but also some children that are being taken out of school all of the time, say perhaps 2 or 3 weeks out of the term time because their parents love going to Tenerife a few times a year, etc. Their peers at school could make fun of them. They could be in trouble. They can't integrate as well because they're not in school. So you're also making your children feel like they're not part of the team anymore in the classroom, and they're missing out on education. And it's just not fair. There really is no excuse whatsoever. If my parents tried to take me out of school, I would have been furious because I loved school. They wouldn't have done it because they were good parents. They understood how important you can get a suntan anytime. And you're not going to learn French or Spanish when you go abroad, because I've had some people use that as an excuse. Oh, I'm taking my children abroad so they can learn a foreign language.
Yeah,
they
right.
need to learn more so than ever because schools aren't as strict as they used to be. And if children aren't getting strictness at home, they need to learn discipline in school. And that does not mean leaving whenever you feel like it to get a bit of sun.
Well, I do wonder, though, Julie, whether or not actually children really need to be in school for the length of time that they are in. I mean, ultimately, you've got 2 sets of exams that really matter. You've got the GCSEs and you've got your A-levels. And there is, I think, a quite decent enough case to be saying you don't really need to be in school all the time. And actually as well, given the way that some curriculums are going and some teachers are, prattling on about gender and all of this rubbish, that actually you might be better being out of school.
Yeah, that's an argument. I mean, I've never done it myself. I'm a good girl. I take my kids out during the holidays and that's that. But I'm noticing a lot more people who didn't used to do it are now doing it. And I think there's a combination of those factors. I think it's number one, prices have gone up so much. But as you say, education isn't actually what it used to be. I know Paula mentioned, the 3 R's that we used to have. Now there's so much fluff in education. There's this, that, and the other. Personal this, personal that, learning about sex when you're 5. I don't think all of that is particularly necessary. Of course, don't take your child out when he's 15 and about to take his GCSEs or your daughter. But I do think that education, there's a lot of fluff there that didn't used to be there. I agree with you, Patrick.
OK, well, we'll have to leave it... Oh, sorry, Paula, go on. Final word.
I was going to say, is the lady insinuating that it's OK to take your child out of school if there's quite a woke curriculum, but if the school is good, you won't take them out?
No, I just think I'm seeing more of it. I'm seeing more parents thinking, why go in anyway? If you're going to be learning,
they're not very good parents saying that.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know. It's up for debate, isn't it?
OK, well, good stuff.
Two sides. Literally it is, yeah.
Two sides there. Paula London and Julie Cook, thank you very much indeed. I just think... Oh, no, you're very small.
Much as thing.
I just think it's a breakdown of society, isn't it, really? If you just decide, oh, I can take my kid out.
Yes, no.
Oh, screw all the rest of you.
No, I was being a bit flippant.
My life.
I mean, I don't think I...
What are you teaching your child? You don't have to play by the rules? Everyone can just do whatever the hell they like.
No, I agree. But one thing I will say, though, is it is a shame how expensive holidays are, both at home and abroad, by the way, when it comes to term time. We're in a fortunate position.
My mum always tells me her only holiday when she was a child was a corrugated iron hut in Wales.
Gosh.
So there you go, and it rained, apparently.
Where is she now?
South France.
Right. OK, all right. Well, let's get you over to the news.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. Tory leadership contender James Cleverly's launched his bid vowing to bring back the Rwanda plan, as he also said Conservative answers are needed to solve the most challenging problems facing our country. Cleverly highlighted the need for us to remake the argument for capitalism, to boost economic growth and give younger people a stake in society. He also said he'd increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. And on illegal migration, Mr Cleverly says we need to have a deterrent. Kemi Badenoch's also launched her Tory leadership campaign today, calling for change in the Conservative Party. The Shadow Community Secretary and contender to replace Rishi Sunak says her party has to focus on renewal to be ready to return to power. Ms Badenoch used the speech to also accuse Labour of pulling the wool over the eyes of the public, insisting that it's time for something new. The Prime Minister has said the scrapping of single-phrase inspection headline grades for schools in England will be a relief for parents. Previously, Ofsted awarded 1 of 4 headline grades to schools that it inspects, and those are outstanding, good, requires improvement and inadequate. The Department for Education says for inspections this academic year, though, parents will see 4 grades across the existing subcategories, those being quality of education, behaviour and attitudes, personal development and leadership and management. The Prime Minister says it'll hold schools accountable. And the wife of a Conservative councillor has pleaded guilty to publishing written material to stir up racial hatred. 41-year-old childminder Lucy Connolly called for mass deportations and attacks on hotels housing asylum seekers in a post on X on the day that 3 little girls were killed in Southport. The post has now been deleted from her account and she later apologised for acting on false and malicious information. Lucy is the wife of Conservative councillor Raymond Connolly. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from Will Hollis at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time for your latest weather update here on GB News from the Met Office. Big thunderstorms likely in places this afternoon, by no means everywhere catching a downpour, but where they are forming, dropping a lot of rain in a short space of time. It's a bit of a messy picture with low pressure sitting across the country, but also a whole tangle of weather fronts all drifting up from the south. That's why it's still quite warm and humid. We are seeing some big downpours developing this afternoon, particularly over parts of mid and East Wales into the West Midlands and especially northeast Scotland. Much of eastern England staying dry. It may well brighten up here and still quite a warm and humid feel, 24, maybe 25 in 1 or 2 places. It's cooler where we've got the clouds and the outbreaks of rain, particularly persistent over western Scotland. But it's really in the northeast of Scotland where we're looking at some pretty nasty thunderstorms breaking out and spreading slowly northwards. A lot of spray, surface water on the roads here, the potential for some flooding as well. The rain maybe not as heavy further west, but it is still a pretty damp day across western Scotland and the east of Northern Ireland. Then another zone where we could catch some big thunderstorms, parts of Wales and the West Midlands especially. So again, that could cause some disruption. The thunderstorm warning remains in place until midnight. We'll see them drifting further north, perhaps into parts of northern England during the evening time as well. But generally, it does turn a bit drier as we go through the night, certainly in western Scotland and the east of Northern Ireland. Some showers perhaps coming into the southeast. Still pretty warm, pretty humid across these eastern areas, but further west starting to turn a little fresher overnight, some places down into single figures. And for many, there'll be a cooler, fresher feel on Tuesday. Still a lot of cloud over the Midlands, and there will still be some heavy showers potentially, most likely over East Anglia and the southeast, but generally a sunnier day for northern England, Wales and southwest England. A few showers coming into the northwest, and as I said, starting to turn a little bit fresher and cooler by the afternoon.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M18 northbound in Falkirk. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 8 for the M8, 7, 6 and 9 for Bannockburn. Slow for the M8 westbound in Glasgow between junction 13 Provan and 15 for Townhead. Queues on the M1 southbound in South Yorkshire due to an earlier accident between the Woodhall services towards junction 30 for Worksop. Long delays on the M6 southbound in Warwickshire. There's a lane closed for an accident at junction 4A for the M42. And severe delays on the M5 Avonmouth Bridge southbound in Bristol. There's 2 lanes closed for an accident between junction 18 for the M49 and 19 for Portishead. And we've got congestion in Kent, firstly on the M25 anti-clockwise at the Dartford tunnels and on the M26 westbound at the intersection with the M25. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. We've got loads coming your way. But before all of that, I'm just going to introduce to the frame Martin Daubney, because he's on in about 23 minutes' time. Martin, what's on your show?
Guys, every time I see you, what a wonderful chemistry. It's almost like you know each other. I'd like to see much more of you pair on our screens. On today's show, Parliament goes back to school. I've got Lee Anderson coming to the studio for his first interview of this term. He'll open up to me about the extraordinary death threats he's had over the summer, which have culminated in court cases. And guess what? No stiff sentences for those who harangued Lee Anderson, quite unlike what happened to Ed Miliband. And once again, the conversation is of two-tier justice. It feels, to him at least, that if you're from the political right, the insults are completely acceptable. And then talking the political right, the Tory leadership race is on pace. Does anybody care? Will it make any difference? Is it like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? James Cleverly saying he'll bring Rwanda back. Well, not a single person ever went to Rwanda. Why would bringing a plan back that never delivered make any difference the second time round? And of course, Germany, political revolution in the air there. Plus, the winter fuel allowance, they won't allow a vote on it because their voting record will be held against them for all time. They'd be shamed by making pensioners freeze. That's why they won't allow us a true vote. We'll have all that 3 till 6.
Yeah, lovely stuff, Martin. Thank you very much, mate. It's always one to watch, especially today. Martin Daubney will be lighting up your television screens from 3 p.m. But we're going to be talking about another very controversial topic now, aren't we?
We are, yes. The Paralympics, just like the Olympics in Paris, is being overshadowed by a transgender controversy.
Honestly, sorry, this is just ridiculous. Italian trans athlete Valentina Petrillo, who was competing as a male only 6 years ago, has qualified for the women's T12 400-metre semi-final. The current 200-metre bronze world championship medalist is looking to secure an Olympic medal, which will be the first in Paralympic history. I just don't understand why anyone bothers. I'll bring in now Peter Tatchell, LGBTI+, whatever else campaigner. Peter, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. We have a 50-year-old Italian man in the semi-final of the Women's Paralympics running. How can that be OK?
Well, a 51-year-old trans woman who the World Para-Athletics body, the governing body of the Paralympics, has decided that her testosterone levels are sufficiently low to fairly compete against other women athletes. So far, she's through to the semi-finals, but she was only the 6th fastest. So there are 5 other biological women who beat her in the heats. So I don't think she's in much of a chance to get a medal. She might. The other thing that's worthwhile pointing out is that if you look at her physical size and body shape, it's very similar to that of other women athletes who she's competing against.
OK,
So
Peter, it's not just about... It's not just about whether this athlete will win the race, potentially taking away a space from someone else. Competing as a male only 6 years ago, is this just about testosterone? Is that the only difference between a male athlete and a female athlete now?
Well, no, Valentina has been through a process of hormone treatment and gender reassignment, and that has reduced and interfered with her metabolism. She is now not as strong as she was when a man. She's got less energy, less strength. So that is why the world governing body has said it seems fair that she can compete.
Didn't know women have less energy.
Obviously, fairness is very important in sport, and I totally get that and I support it. But I don't think there is evidence from the world governing body that she has specific advantages since she did the transition, has undergone those very extensive...
It's one of the very obvious signs that there is an advantage, the fact that he's 51 years old and he's at the Olympics.
Well, that is a disadvantage. You know, she is many years older, in some cases, I think 20 or more years older than other athletes. So that's a disadvantage.
Athletes,
Age is working against her.
Well, it's not, is it? It's in the semi-final of the Olympics. They've got to the Olympics. It's ridiculous. I mean, you don't see... In what other professional sport do you see, realistically, the one that involves some kind of physical exertion? Someone who's 51 years old competing at the top table like this. I mean, the implication would be that maybe they have a natural advantage, Peter.
Well, the implication is that they are a very studious and industrious athlete who trains very well. And by the way, Valentina's race times are much lower now than when she competed as a man. And that's because she's undergone hormone treatments and so on, which have physiologically altered her. They've made her body more akin to that of a woman. And that's how hormones work.
I understand your argument, Peter. I think the problem is that a lot of people just think that when it comes down to sports, it should be biological sex that dictates which category you're in. So we're never going to agree on this because you think that if you've gone through the hormone therapy and you've gone through the gender reassignment, therefore you should be able to compete in the category you like. But other people think it just has to simply come down to biological sex. So we're never going to agree on this one. But do you understand why there is some, people have a problem with this?
I totally get the concerns, and those concerns are valid. They need to be assessed. But as I said, the world governing body, World Para Athletics, has assessed...
Yeah, but the rules keep changing. That's why I don't take that as gospel, because they keep changing their mind on things, don't they?
They are the professional body, and they have deemed that fairness in sport is very important. And in their estimation, given the treatments that Valentina's been through and her lower level of testosterone, that it's fair that she competes.
Just having a little look again.
The world governing body.
Who's the head of World Para-Athletics? A chap called Paul. Who's the competition senior manager? You've got someone called Martin. I just think, yet again, you've got men here dictating what a woman is. Really, I just find that, all right, great. So Paul has said, has he, that Valentina is a woman. Well, we'll have to take Paul's word. Paul, that's fine, that's great. But if Paul's okay with it, then women everywhere have to be fine with it, Peter.
Hang on, the decision to allow Valentina to compete was not down to one or two people in the world governing body.
Well, they run it. They set the rules.
Down to a committee which looked at all the evidence and made a decision. So it wasn't just men or just a couple of men. It was a committee decision which looked very thoroughly at the medical and other evidence and came to this conclusion. Now, I agree that this is a tricky, difficult issue, and I don't feel comfortable with it, but I think we have to err on the side of inclusion unless there is compelling evidence to the contrary. And there is no compelling evidence that Valentina, after her transition, has a particular advantage.
Yeah, the argument, though, that she's older, so therefore doesn't have that advantage in that way, or she's not going to win the race anyway. I mean, that just... Anyway, Peter Tatchell, thank you very much. Always good to speak to you. Peter Tatchell, LGBTI plus liberation campaigner.
Yeah.
Never going to agree on that one.
No, we're not, but anyway, whatever. So, right, welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain, of course. We've still got a little while left. Did you get an Oasis ticket? If you did, how much are you willing to sell it me for? No, sorry. We want to know whether or not the government is going to investigate the steep price rises that we saw in these ticket websites. So actually, do the government just need to butt out of this? People were willing to pay whatever they paid, OK? But then we'll have a chat about it when we come back.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Michael found the recipe for success without going to university. Instead, he went looking for answers inside of a kitchen. The 22-year-old has just finished a level 2 course in professional cookery at UCB, a college in Birmingham.
When I started UCB, I was expecting to be so intense from day one, but it's not. It sort of builds up, so to the point where you get comfortable. And building that comfort is a huge part of becoming a chef, because you need to be comfortable being in your own skin.
This week, tens of thousands of students get their A-level results. The college wants them to remember university isn't the only option after school, and West Midlands Mayor Richard Parker agrees.
university is the right route for lots of our young people, but there are other pathways to getting access to qualifications that will give young people the skills they need to succeed in life.
Further education principal Rosa Wells says apprenticeships and technical courses are also great routes to a career.
Here at University College Birmingham, we offer vocational courses. These are hands-on technical courses that can give people a different opportunity, something different to school. So we've got brilliant facilities that really give students industry standard training.
A skills shortage across the UK means youngsters learning trades are desperately needed. 36% of job vacancies are due to shortages. The Labour government's new body, Skills England, has been created to bring training providers and businesses together with local and national authorities plus unions to target trade gaps and regional requirements. Michael's now finishing his qualification. Where he goes next is down to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back. So the UK government has announced that it will investigate the steep price increases for concert tickets sold on official websites after fans face soaring costs for next year's highly anticipated Oasis reunion shows.
Culture Minister Lisa Nandy, she's expressed her concern over these vastly inflated prices on authorised retailer sites, which she said could exclude many fans from attending.
Sorry, it's not communism, this, is it? If you've got money, you can go to certain things that people who haven't got money can't go to. And I say this as a bloke who was unable to get an Oasis ticket. What do they want? I don't get it.
The investigation will focus on the transparency and fairness of dynamic pricing, a practice that raises ticket prices in response to high demand. Uber and things like that also do this, as part of a broader review of ticket sales and consumer protections. OK, joining us now to discuss this is consumer expert and host of the False Economy podcast, Vic Slayton. Now, as a consumer expert, I imagine you are on the side of the consumer. So you'll be on the side of people who are going for the tickets and then they realise that they'd jumped in price in, a few minutes.
Yeah.
More than they were expecting.
Yeah.
What's your argument?
Oh, it's less of an argument and more of a sort of transparency point, I think, in terms of how they're priced. I think, there's definitely some sense in it is what it is. Things are priced how they're priced, and if people can afford them, they can charge what they like. But I think where it becomes a consumer issue is when you get to the front of the queue, you think you know exactly what it's going to cost, and then you have 3 minutes to decide if you want to pay triple the price or not, because that is quite a nice psychological trick there. At that point, you've got sunk cost fallacy because you've been queuing up for hours and hours. You're really excited about it. Your mates have transferred you the money. It's all on you. Are you going to let these tickets go, or are you going to pay the price they want? And that's where it becomes a little bit morally wrong, I think. If they'd said at the start, do you know what, the prices might change, before you even got in the queue, if they'd said that at the start, maybe they would have had to stand on the year, because as you say, they're not a charity, they can charge what they like.
I just wonder if it all falls down by this idea that, for example, people like me who didn't get a ticket, who would willingly offer the nation £1,500 for a ticket right now, if you give it to me right now, email in. Anyway,
that's ridiculous amount to spend.
So if someone goes, oh well, the tickets are sold out, it's only these. What's stopping people just reselling them to people like me for £1,500 now? I'll take it off your hands.
There you go.
Well, that's the point. Very little. That is the point. And one of the arguments that the ticket sites have said is that they are trying to stop touts by basically becoming the tout themselves at the checkout and paying what people are willing to pay, taking what they're willing to pay exactly at point of sale. But I don't see how they're going to be able to crack down and stop people from reselling these. You know, if you are going to list them on a website where they can check back and go, actually, we can cancel these tickets now, if they care enough, they can do that. But in terms of stopping tickets changing hands, somebody offering you a ticket in the pub for whatever you can pay, it's a real struggle. I don't think they're ever going to get a handle on fully stopping the resale from happening. But just because people charge those prices,
far too
just because people are charging those prices doesn't mean they're going to get it. Like, yes, they're listed for £9,000. No one's going to pay that.
Yeah. Well, do you think ministers are right to have a look at this dynamic pricing? I mean, do you think they should actually ban, tickets from going up in price when you're in the queue already? I mean, it seems a little bit interventionist, doesn't it?
I think as I said, if they said at the start that this is a risk, I mean, calling it surge pricing is a bit of a cheek when we knew exactly how much demand there was going to be for these tickets. There was no doubt that this was going to happen. This was built into the system. It wasn't a surprise surge like an Uber surprise when it's a little bit busier because you and three of your mates are trying to book at the same time. There was no surprise here. This isn't an unexpected demand. So maybe they should have priced them honestly in the first place. So I think where it becomes a consumer issue is the surprise. Let us know at the start. You know what? You're getting in the queue now. There's 75 quid. We'll let you know they're going to change pricing. You can choose to opt out and let people who have got the money carry on with the process, because they just wasted a lot of people's time and disappointed a lot of people at the checkout. So,
well, there you go. Well, I couldn't even make it through to the buy the ticket stage.
You're handling it so well.
Oh. And Vix, thank you very much. Vix Layton there is the host of False Economy podcast.
I mean, some people have been saying, these two guys, working class roots, they should have, set that price and kept it there. I don't know.
Stop it.
I suppose it's quite clever, isn't it? To get you hooked and then put the price up.
Yeah, there you go. They're entitled to whatever.
Vicious capitalists.
Whatever they want to do. Anyway, look, Martin Daubney's up next. He'll be lighting up your television screens for the next 3 hours. And just to let you know as well, I will be back on 9 to 11 p.m.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Plenty going on in the skies today. Some big thunderstorms in places, but other areas just fine with some warm and humid sunshine. It's a bit of a messy weather picture. Low pressure system sitting over the UK. Old weather fronts generating some hefty downpours. We've seen some thunderstorms and a few more to come through the evening time, potentially causing some disruption. Parts of the Welsh Marches up into the West Midlands, northwest England, but also northeast Scotland, all tending to ease as we go through the night, but still a few showers coming into parts of the Midlands during the early hours. Still quite warm and humid over eastern England, but generally turning cooler and fresher, particularly in parts of Scotland, well down into single figures here. And that fresher air will spread in more widely as we go through tomorrow, but still probably quite warm, quite humid first thing in the morning over the Midlands, southern England. Still a lot of cloud and still some showers here, but brighter skies further north over northern England and much of Scotland. But for Northern Ireland and western Scotland, there's another zone of rain coming in. It won't be as heavy as the thunderstorms that we've seen today, but nevertheless a dull, damp start in the northwest. A lot of clouds still over the Midlands and eastern England early on. Still a few showers here. Still got the humid air in place for tomorrow. Potential for one or two heavy ones, particularly across the far southeast, Kent into parts of Norfolk and Suffolk during the early afternoon. Possibility of the odd thunderstorm. But for much of Wales, northern England, southwest England, it's a much brighter day and a fresher feel as well, with temperatures for many in the high teens. Wednesday's a fresher feel even in the south and east, and again a mix of sunshine and showers, but for many, I think, across southern Scotland, northern England, it will be a fine day. We'll see quite a few showers for Northern Ireland, Wales, and developing again over central and eastern parts of England. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win a £36,000 secret salary in the latest Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Take a year off and keep it to yourself. You don't even need to tell the taxman, as it's totally tax-free. For a chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text